Having transformed into a demon, he ultimately suffered defeat at the hands of the one everyone called a hero. The hero looked down at the fallen enemy, feeling pity that darkness had consumed him, and wondered why he had become a demon. Lying defeated, the man cursed the simple hero but said that if his death brought victory, it was a small price. His body began to dissolve into black mist. He recalled the past a time when he was simply himself and could not prove his family's innocence without resorting to demonic power. But even in that form, his soul remained. It was a hellish existence, constantly given as food to demons. He lost track of time. Several years passed, perhaps more than a decade. No matter how many times he begged for the torment to end, it never ceased. Finally, only the last fragment of his soul remained. He thought with relief, but finally. His consciousness focused, the thought persisted, and finally. The little boy suddenly sat up in bed, gasping for air, eyes wide open in shock. He glanced around the luxurious room, unfamiliar, and yet strangely familiar, and mentally asked himself if it was his. His gaze stopped on something brightly shining. As he looked at it, a wave of nostalgia washed over him. He took a deep, trembling breath. For the first time in what seemed like an eternity, he was finally able to breathe. When he realized this, other sensations returned. His hands began to move. He once again had a physical body and a voice to speak. He got up and was drawn to the window. The sun gently warmed his skin under the fresh, clear sky, and for a moment he thought it was paradise, but that thought instantly shattered against the memory of his fate. How demons had caught him, and he himself had become one of them. It could not be. While he struggled with this impossibility, a flickering board of light materialized before him, greeting him and saying that he had become something called a seeker, and asked him to open the menu. His mind was in turmoil. The soul should have been completely destroyed, so if this was true, then what was it? Confused by the strange situation, he decided to comply and whispered, "Open menu." He froze, staring at the floating letters, magic completely foreign to him. Part of his sadness whispered that this might be a demon's trap, a cruel illusion, but standing there, he realized that this was the only clue to understanding his circumstances, and with a nervous gulp, he finally made his choice. The menu responded, unfolding and showing a list: status, skills, quests, message window. The terms were unfamiliar, but he instinctively reached for status, and when a new panel opened, information appeared on the screen that stunned him. He was identified as Salam Bergman, a 14-year-old boy with the title Seeker and level -51. This name was his own, and he turned out to be the eldest son of a ducal house. This age hit like a blow. 14, he recalled becoming a demon at 17, and after the hero's victory, he was sure that more than 10 years had passed. While his soul was being devoured, none of this added up. Turning back to the mirror, he saw the reflection of a boy with a thin body and silvery blonde hair. A distant memory surfaced. His mother once praised this very color when he was little, and then he remembered that by 17 that bright shine had faded, the hair had become dull and rough, and none of this fit any logic. He again turned his gaze to the glowing menu, hoping to find more answers, selected the Skills tab, but the panel that appeared was empty, with only 2 words: no skills. His eyes widened in disbelief. The revelation stunned him. No abilities, yet he remembered once having a worthy magical talent. Shaking his head, he opened the message box and found a welcome message calling him a seeker, training on the righteous path, and accumulating merits through good deeds. He sighed with submission, so this was the path to nurture the heart and not let it succumb to demonic temptation again. The wording was vague, but the intent was clear. He froze before the system window. A new task glowed before him. Reach Seeker level 30 to resist the demon's temptation. He recalled his status from his past life somewhere around level 50, but suddenly, a cold horror ran through his body when he saw the truth. Salam Bergman, male, Seeker level 14, -51, -51. This number stunned him, and he realized that if this was the past, his fall under the demon's temptation would repeat again. He needed to raise his level, but how? The shock from this discovery pushed him back into memories. Everything he had always wanted the power to make them pay. He remembered his older self, consumed by this thirst, who knew he would become humanity's enemy, but still fully gave in to it. With this power, he could finally defeat the hero who humiliated him, the arrogant marquis's daughter, and the haughty little princess who looked down on him. He would lose to no one. This desperate thirst for power was born from deep shame. He remembered the disappointment in his father's and his servants' eyes. He was considered weak, pathetic, worthless, a defeated simple boy, and unworthy of the princess. And from that barely noticeable crack in his heart, the demon's temptation began to seep in for the first time. The temptation turned into a distorted reality. A voice from his past echoed, repeating that he was completely powerless. He relived the moment when the blonde princess called him a demon. His human thinking and feelings were stolen and distorted, and she, shouting, unleashed a torrent of ice upon him. But the magic was not enough. He withstood the attack. His wounds had already begun to heal, and the princess, once praised as equal to the first king in battle, just stood and looked in disbelief. He loomed over her, laughing at how she begged on her knees and promised to cut off her head. Barely had he managed to act when they were interrupted by a common hero. Salam turned around and recognized that rude orphan. A smile of contempt appeared on his face, and he spat, pouring out his hatred for heroic righteousness. The next battle became the climax of his fall. This is what awaited those who succumbed to demonic temptation. He was overthrown by a hero, and his soul was fed again and again by demons. Drawn from the depths of that memory, he now understands. His soul was filled with incredible magical power, and that is why the demons that devoured it became so strong and eventually caused the fall of the kingdom. He realizes that he could not have stood, but perhaps the barriers that protected people had already weakened, and demons slipped through them. He was simply the first to fall. The task spins again in his head to reach the 30th level of the Seeker, because if he raises his level, maybe he can take a different path. He remembers that feeling desperate clinging to power. He never wanted to lose himself and even less wanted to destroy the kingdom, but he gained power. With that last painful exhale, he sharply inhaled. A new determination settled in his eyes. He examined the path ahead. Ghostly notifications materialized in the air. A welcome message, followed by the start of his main and daily quests. Reaching out his hand, he touched the glowing text and wondered if this was truly the path that would harden his heart and raise his level. The system announced a newly launched daily quest, to pray and perform one good deed to gain experience points. He sighed deeply, considering the task, decided to try praying, folded his hands, but at first, nothing seemed to happen. Just as doubts crept in, the message confirmed that the prayer was completed. He realized in shock that he had never truly prayed sincerely before, and that perhaps the right mindset was the key, because his experience points did not change. He also realized he had to do a good deed. Although all this seemed vague, he decided to try donating to the church. As the carriage rattled along the road, he looked out the window. The landscape was enchanting, painted with the colors of autumn leaves. What he saw awakened an unexpected feeling in him. He thought such emotions suited an old man more than a 14-year-old boy, but he could not hold back. Memories of a long, suffering-filled life were still fresh. This simple moment seemed incredibly profound. Beautiful scenery, gentle breeze, rhythmic rocking of the carriage, all of it was so pleasant. He cherished this fleeting peace. A sharp contrast to the decade of eternity he had spent while demons devoured his soul. He touched his face, struggling with disbelief. At first he thought it was a cruel demon's illusion or the last flash of memory before the soul faded, but the sensations were too vivid and real to be just a dream. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. It was Nadia, his bodyguard and fencing teacher. He remembered her as a brilliant, pure, and very skilled warrior, a half-elf, and because of her long life she had not changed at all. Noticing his distant gaze, she asked if something was bothering him. She stepped back in shock from his subdued behavior. It was clear she was worried when she asked what had happened, surprised by his sudden meekness, and even offering to return to the castle if he felt unwell. He quickly assured her that everything was fine and asked not to be treated as if he were sick. Inside he recalled a painful truth. In his previous life, Nadia had left him, disgusted by his distorted nature, and he believed that even if she had turned away from him, his downfall was inevitable. He apologized for making her worry. His apology seemed to somewhat calm her anxiety, although a barely noticeable embarrassment remained. She sighed quietly, her face softened. "I understand," she whispered, "I apologize." He realized that she had worried so much because of distrust towards him, and this made him hurt for having responded sharply to her. He thanked her. She was already completely fine and decided to be more cautious, starting with correcting how he communicated with others, remembering that even Strangeboard had warned to avoid strange actions. When he mentioned the board, she was completely confused. She asked what it was about, and he, stunned, could not understand how she did not see it. Feeling that she needed to be careful, she quietly suggested to her young lord to look at his finger, understanding that this phenomenon was visible only to him. He explained that it was a strange panel usually hidden from view, but as soon as he focused, it appeared and showed his level, and how much experience was needed for the next upgrade, and because of the awkward official name, he decided to simply call it the Seeker System. Arriving at the place, Salam made a donation. The church attendant thanked him excitedly, marveling at the generosity, a whole gold coin from the young heir of Duke Bergman. He considered the donation a gold coin enough to feed a commoner for a month, and was sure it would complete the daily quest, but a message from the secret system said otherwise. He had wasted public taxes in vain, lost 500 experience points, and dropped a level. The shock hit instantly because the system apparently considered donations to this church a waste, and anger flared in him when he recalled the truth: the church in this country was corrupt, and its actions had become one of the main reasons for the kingdom's fall before the demons, so losing experience for supporting such a worthless organization was unbearable. His rage caused punishment again. The system reported that for losing control over his emotions, he was deducted another 50 experience points, and he froze at such severity, realizing that even the thought of anger was costly. He clenched his fists and desperately tried to calm down, while Katia looked at him, puzzled by his sudden agitation. He barely kept himself together, told Katia that it was all over here, and insisted that they take a walk around the city, honestly admitting that he needed to catch his breath before he completely lost it. As they walked through the square, a pleasant aroma caught his attention. He stopped, sniffed the air, and asked aloud if it was the smell of chocolate. His senses led them to a nearby shop. In the window, rows and rows of temptingly looking treats. He sighed, completely exhausted by the demands of the system. A strong craving for sweets surged, but he hesitated, fearing that indulging himself would lead to another experience penalty. Eventually, he decided that enough was enough, cast aside the anxiety, would deal with the consequences later, decisively pointed and asked for one of everything. He handed over the box to Kodia and, with a sincere smile, explained that it was a thank you for accompanying him. Embarrassed, she asked if she really deserved it, but he insisted that she always takes care of him, and when she accepted the gift, he also noted how popular the store had become. Her face lit up with pure joy. She sincerely thanked him, and the secret system instantly reacted, announcing that for making Kodia happy, he received 10 experience points, and also after completing the daily quest, 1 good deed a day. Both this and the prayer quest were considered completed, so he was given an additional 500 experience points and a level up. Glances and distrust, he was stunned. Such a small gesture gave such a big increase and boosted his level to -51. His embarrassment grew stronger and turned into suspicion. He did not understand the logic of this system. It seemed strange to him. Unfair verdicts now seemed less like divine judgment and more like a devilish trick, and after everything that happened in his past life, he did not know what was expected of him now at all. Whether God or demon created this system, it did not matter to him. The next morning, he decided to take on the daily tasks despite his age. He greeted his servant Marie and immediately began thinking about what good deed to do today. He looked closely at Marie, the maid who had cared for him since infancy, and suddenly realized how young she probably was for now. He decided that the best thing was to follow the system's rules and level up. Implementing his plan, he handed Marie the chocolate he had bought yesterday. She gasped in surprise, stumbled over "thank you," and secretly wondered why he was acting so strangely. He waited, but the system was silent, and this confused him. He recalled that a donation to the corrupt church had yielded a bad result, whereas a gift to Kodia, which she had not asked for, on the contrary added experience, and he began to guess that it all depended on whom exactly you gave to. Forming a new hypothesis, he decided that the next attempt would be a donation to the city orphanage. He asked Marie to arrange a visit the same day after classes and training, and the maid, surprised by such a place, confirmed the order. That afternoon, when he came to the orphanage, he noticed the well-kept grounds and happy children playing. Order clearly prevailed here. He approached the matron, handed her a coin, and asked her to use this generous gift to feed the children well, and the woman accepted it gratefully and promised to use it properly. The experiment turned out to be a stunning success. A message from the seeker system confirmed 100 EXP for the donation and another 500 EXP for completing the daily prayer quests in one successful day. Clenching his fist in triumph, he understood the key. As long as his actions sincerely helped someone, the system would reward him. He turned to the matron of the shelter with a confident smile. Now he definitely knew where to go. He promised to continue helping so that the children would be happy, and asked to be informed of any needs, and the matron, filled with gratitude, thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Believing him on his word, she said that some children were cold and could use winter blankets. He gladly agreed and promised to deliver them the next day, while already running through a plan in his head. By supporting other aid institutions on his family's lands, he could constantly fulfill his daily tasks. But his simple plan immediately became complicated. In the manor, the maid Marie announced the arrival of the fencing teacher, and other servants handed him documents to sign. He felt the weight of responsibilities literally crushing him. Between studies, training, household affairs, and the absence of his parents, he was completely exhausted. He remembered the shelter's promise, but decided that a personal visit from the master's son so late would be too burdensome. So to avoid disturbing them, he asked a servant to deliver the blankets. He was confident that this would still fulfill his daily task. Soon the servant reported the messenger's return and handed over a letter of thanks from the shelter. But Salam did not receive any notification from the system. He looked at the letter confusedly and wondered if a good deed only counts if you do it yourself, and not just order it to be done. The consequences of this discovery settled in his thoughts. If personal actions are the key to a good deed, he wondered if the opposite might be true, and a dark thought flashed. Could he then do evil indirectly, without taking any part in it? To test this new theory, he called Marie, and with a quiet but firm expression on his face, ordered her to break a branch from the nearest plant. The surprised maid hesitated for a moment, but then reluctantly agreed to do it. The system responded instantly and punitively. A message popped up: 10 EXP lost for intentional damage to a plant. He froze stunned because the system recognized him as guilty even for the actions of others. Just as he began to look for loopholes, an even harsher punishment arrived -100 EXP simply for thinking about cheating, and he watched in disbelief as his EXP rapidly fell. Shaken by the discovery, he let Marie go, telling her it was over. The maid, who was warming herself in the cozy warmth of the room, apologized and quickly left. He listened as Marie joked with cheerful laughter about the cold in the servants' waiting room. Supposedly, there should be some magical heater here, but only such a young master as he could make the room truly warm. She explained that unlike the heater in his room, which was powered by his enormous mana, the one in the waiting room worked on the servant's own limited mana, so it was much weaker and only emitted gentle warmth. It dawned on him, the mana that servants could allocate for heating was miserably small compared to that of the nobility. Marie added that although she was suitable as a maid, all mana reserves were primarily given to work, and in the main manor, where smoke and soot were forbidden, even the rest rooms relied on these weak magical devices. He realized he had never thought about the practical limitations of servants and decided to check the heater in the rest room himself. Having made a decision, he resolutely headed to the maid's quarters. Mari and another maid froze in shock. When he opened the door, they exclaimed his title in surprise. He found the break room where the maids were asking what he was doing during their break. His suspicion was confirmed. The heater was receiving barely any mana and was hardly working. Closing his eyes, he poured his own power into it, filled the device with mana, and asked if the room had become cozier. His action was immediately noticed. A notification appeared before him confirming he had done a kindness, received 100 EXP, and completed 2 daily quests, for which he was given another 500 EXP, causing him to level up, while the maids basked in the sudden warmth as he quietly celebrated his success. He pondered, what is kindness? He reasoned that if he continued to pour magic into the heating system daily, it would not only make others happy, but probably count towards completing their task. He thought further, understanding that the system was unlikely to be so generous, but decided, even if he did not get EXP for it, he would warn the room every night on their behalf. This selfless decision was immediately rewarded. Another system noticed him and gave 300 experience points for a selfless heart. He froze, realizing that just as one could lose points for a bad thought, one could also gain them for a good one. The fact that the system could even limit his thoughts, he considered the hardest and most painful part. His troubled expression did not go unnoticed. Mari asked what was wrong, noticing that he had behaved like a completely different person all morning, and he mentally acknowledged the truth of her words before addressing her with a serious question. If you had to do one good deed every day, what would you do? He recalls his former self. Now he is 14, late autumn, next year admission to the academy, so he is constantly absorbed in studying. According to his memories from that time, stress made him explode. He shouted at the servants every time something displeased him. Mari enthusiastically praises his current determination. She likes that he is trying to become more mature before heading to the royal capital, and Salam inwardly begs the system not to punish him for past actions, admitting that shouting was wrong. When he asks what she thinks about good deeds, Mari thoughtfully says that if she were in her place, she would go around collecting trash all over the city, and says this with amazing enthusiasm. Salam suggests that he'll try it too, and Mari is horrified. She quickly objects that such a thing is not fitting for a young master, explaining that she meant it only for herself. Finally, he realized the social consequences of her idea. With horror, he understood that if someone found out that a member of the ducal family was doing such a humiliating menial task, he would definitely be kicked out of the family. A simple daily chore turned into a complex social status problem. This complexity drove his thoughts down a darker path. Perhaps running away from home would be easier then. He could only focus on becoming stronger. He recalls the future he is trying to prevent, a demon invasion that destroys not only the house of Ducal, but the entire kingdom. Remembers how annoyed he was by the power of a simple hero who defeated him, and how their limited powers proved powerless against the ever-growing swarm of demons that eventually wiped the kingdom off the map. He thinks that if he hid away and lived alone, he could simply avoid the temptations of the demon and his own transformation. But he knows this is a false plan. His personal escape will not stop the demon invasion. He remembers that it is approaching, and widespread corruption in the church will only reinforce it. Abandoning the idea of flight, he rushes to find a way to save the kingdom from falling without losing his influence. He returns to Marie, rejects the idea of hunting monsters. It would cost him points, and he has already made donations. So once again, directly and frankly, he asks her to suggest some good deed he could do every day. His intensity frightens Marie. She cannot say anything. A system warning flashes on the screen. Experience points for scaring a woman. The stunned Salam immediately apologizes and asks her not to worry. His sincere words move Marie to tears. She cannot get enough of how kind her young lord has become, and Salam feels guilty. realizing how terrible he must have been if such a small gesture shook her so much. Not finding a suitable daily task, Salam wandered in search of advice to mentally prepare for the academy, and started talking with an older mentor who understood everything and threw out an unexpected idea to make magical devices for the poor with low magical potential, explaining that her field is enchantment magic, and she creates such tools, but developments for the poor are often ignored due to low profits. However, the mentor agreed that research should be directed there, a statement that stunned the two present. He listens as his teacher says that thinking about tools through the eyes of others is excellent training, but the boy seems stunned by the very thought of inventing something every day, and the teacher reacts with disappointment. At first he hesitated, but agreed, said it sounded interesting, promised to think about it, and placed a quail on the paper, while his mentor watched him, pondering his next move. Suddenly an idea occurred to him. He turns his gaze to the servant nearby and asks her about magical heating devices. She says that in the servants' cells they warm themselves. With simple firewood, the castle only hires commoners with sufficient magical ability. In response to this need, he shows a newly created magic circle. He explains that he reworked part of the formula from magical heaters so that the firewood burns more efficiently, placing the circle under the fireplace. It will absorb surrounding mana, and the firewood will burn almost twice as long without using the user's magical power. His mentor was deeply impressed and, enthusiastically noting his incredible talent, thought that if he specialized in enchantment magic, he could improve the lives of countless people. This thought made the young lord reflect. He knew that nobles with such powerful magic as he had must primarily fight magical beasts, because it is their duty. He reflects on the harsh expectations looming over him. The duke's son is valued for combat strength, the ability to kill monsters and reclaim land for people, so he rejects the idea of becoming a specialist in creating tools, leaving enchantment magic as a hobby. He believes he must be strong. Meanwhile, his teacher was enchanted. She could not get enough of his work, and marveled at the amazingly simple and effective formula he invented in one lesson. And the boy, though listening to her praise, secretly worried about poor compatibility with the seeker system. But having received her approval, he decided to send the drawings to a craftsman. When he makes a decision, a notification suddenly appears before him from the system. His experience points suddenly jumped, and he was simply stunned by the unexpected John. The shock recedes, replaced by new determination, knows the road will be hard, but vows not to give up. Following the advice of seeker systems, completing tasks and leveling up, he will overcome demonic temptations, avert the tragic future he remembers, and pave the way to a happy ending. The young boy Salam Bergman wakes up in bed, a tear rolls down his cheek, and with a heavy heart he realizes, 6 days have passed, he has truly returned to the past. A memory of the future suddenly flashed in his head, which he remembers. Although he is only 14 now, in his memory is a life that ended at 17, when he became a demon and was killed by a hero. After that death his body disappeared, and his soul was endlessly devoured by demons. He was forced to watch as his kingdom fell into ruins over a decade, and every painful detail was burned into his mind, though his own soul should have been shattered. But he concludes, all this strange and confusing stuff has some relation to the mysterious seeker system that appeared before Hema system that demands hardening the heart and resisting the temptations of demons, although he does not yet fully understand how it works. To avoid the terrible future he sees, he decides to follow the system's hints. He recalls that attempts with daily quests, a donation to the church, and a gift to the maid had no effect, but contributions to the local shelter elicited a positive response and showed him a clear path. And so for several days in a row, he tirelessly continued to sacrifice to the shelter, and nearby, on guard, stood the elven swordswoman Nadia. He soon realized that the system does not reward excessive generosity. When the shelter already had enough money for maintenance, additional gold was simply no longer counted, but donations of useful magical tools that he himself created still yielded results. His usual rhythm of helping was abruptly interrupted when Nadia approached him with a document and officially informed Salam Salmi that his practical internship starts Tadia monster hunting expedition, and she will go with him as an instructor. He steps out into the wide yard where a group of armed men has gathered. Kodia stands nearby, tensely scanning the crowd, thinking that his task is to look for peasants in trouble. When he contemplates his mission, all gathered together return to him, their faces glowing with anticipation, and they cheerfully shout, "Good morning, Salam Sama." He cheerfully greets his comrades with "Good morning," encourages them to give their all in today's practical training, and reminds everyone that they must train diligently to pass the entrance exams to the academy together next year. When he speaks Gilbertone of the young noble scrumbles to his best friend Valerie, who wears glasses, asking why their targets are only goblins and demanding a more serious challenge. Valerie explains that this expedition is not only about defeating monsters for nobles their age, the very fact of participating and returning successfully is also part of the training. He warns Gilbert, if you don't take this seriously, you'll regret it, because next year's entrance to the academy will be a fierce competition. Valerie notes that many nobles adjust their entrance year to coincide with the princess's year, and Gilbert proudly replies that he knows this and that it is an honor for him to be in the same cohort as Salam Sama. Salam quietly confirms this to himself. The year he plans to enter indeed coincides with the crown princess's study year, and he thinks about the academy's flexible age rule, which allows so many to align their entrance with the princess after all. She is a royal person whose combat power is said to rival that of the first king. The conversation revealed their fears about the competition. They need to excel both in studies and in martial arts. Valerie Meldars, despite her family's status, worries about the martial arts exam, while Gilbert Benson, the son of Count Sana, is anxious about the written part. While the cart rattled, Salam observed his companions, knowing from memories of his future that they were all potential candidates for his inner circle. He recalled the failure from his previous life. After entering the academy, in battle he was surpassed by a commoner who was declared a hero, and in leadership he was overshadowed by the Marquis's daughter. He remembered how vassals pretended to show respect in public, but behind his back he felt their irritated sighs. Feeling this alienation, he snapped and began pushing them away, and slowly a chasm formed between him and those who once stood beside him. The cart rumbled and he returned to reality. He decided that one of the goals of this expedition was to forge true friendship with those who would one day fight alongside him, so he needed to follow the system's hints and act wisely, but his thoughts were interrupted by Gilbert's complaint. Cobalt again. Valerie scolds him and tells him to stop whining. He explains that it's nothing unusual in places with few people. Weak monsters often appear. On human lands, mana is occupied by people, but in uninhabited areas overflowing with mana, monsters are born. That's what the fierce territorial struggle shows. Gilbert was indifferent and muttered that kobolds are just a warm-up for Salam. Suddenly, the cart stopped. 3 kobolds blocked the road. Salam calmly told Gilbert that he would be fine and ordered him to deal with them, saying it was better for everyone to gain combat experience. In panic, Gilbert doubted, but the order had already been given. Strange system rules seemed to guide and push him, but when he ordered someone else to defeat the monsters, the system apparently did not react, and this was different from when he lost points for an extra order to break plant branches. It seems that because Gilbert himself fought the monsters without a shadow of doubt, Salam's experience was not affected. His thoughts sharpened and focused. He still did not fully understand how the system made evaluations, so based on an inner feeling he sought to minimize possible losses if he himself took someone's life. He suspected it could be registered as a flaw, and he wanted to avoid that as much as possible. Suddenly, Gilbert's voice cut through his thoughts. Even the kobolds were a real headache. Salam, as if ignoring the complaint, addressed his people and said that 6 would take part in the next skirmish, everyone except him and Gilbert, and this made everyone simultaneously hold their breath in surprise. When they moved to the next skirmish, horned wolves jumped out of the rustling bushes. Valerie noticed that they were stronger than the kobolds, but confidently said that the group would manage. Salam looked at his young followers. None of them had even stepped into the academy yet, and sent a voice filled with calming power. "Stay calm and fight. I am watching over you," and his people froze in admiration. Encouraged by his words, the faithful rushed into battle, and the clearing in the forest filled with the clang of steel and the roar of beasts as 6 young warriors threw themselves into a wild, chaotic skirmish with a pack of horned wolves. After a quick battle, Gilbert approached him with a broad smile. "You are so kind, Salam Sama," he exclaimed, praising the support Salam had given and emphasizing that this was sharply different from when he himself had not helped then. Salam mentally noted that using supportive magic to help others defeat monsters did not trigger a system reaction, as he had expected. He looked around at his victorious comrades gathered around. The initial trial was behind, and he decided his next move. It was time to understand what would happen if he entered the fight personally. Soon practical training led them to the gates of a neighboring village, where they were met by an elderly woman who introduced herself as the elder and sincerely thanked Lord Salam for coming all the way here personally. He politely accepted her greeting and assured that during their stay they would be under her care. Inside, the village elder began her report. She informed Salam about recent goblin appearances and the discovery of their settlement west of the village. The threat was serious. The group was led by a hobgoblin, several of whom possessed magic. She pointed to a man in full armor and explained that he was the only night watchman here, and although he usually managed local monsters together with the villagers, this new danger was too great, so they had no choice but to ask for reinforcements. In the evening, Besider confirmed that asking for reinforcements was the right step, honestly admitting that he himself would not have coped, and the leader added that everything was much easier thanks to their Lord Salam's father. Hearing praise addressed to him, Salam quietly understood that the duchy's affairs were going well, and his heart filled with pride. She thoughtfully considers his daily mission while Gilbert enthusiastically eats sweets. Salam offers him one, thanking him for the greeting, but Valerie intervenes and asks Gilbert not to spoil his appetite for dinner. Gilbert snorted in response. Does Valerie underestimate how much he can eat? Tension shifts to the matter at hand, and they confirm that the magical oven is indeed broken. While two village women watch, he looks inside the oven and notices worn and dull runes on its enchanted plates. He likes this repair challenge, so with one quick move he adjusts the settings and, satisfied, says that the oven should work again. As soon as the repair was completed, a message flashed in his field of vision. He completed daily tasks, reached level 45, and gained experience for repairing a magical tool. He exclaimed with satisfaction, and the village head, stunned, admitted that she did not understand why the young lord himself so willingly agreed to help. He smiles and explains that nothing is needed. He is simply very interested in the magic of enchantments and was delighted to see such skill. His words moved the women to tears, and they promised to put their whole soul into preparing the dinner as a sign of deep gratitude. Having fixed the magical instrument and completed the daily quest, he smiled and thought that asking the village head for more tasks was the right move. His work is not yet finished. Ed is patrolling the perimeter of the village, inspecting the monster-damaged fortifications, noticing the simple earthen and magical barriers that the villagers could eventually restore, but decides, since he is already here, it is better to fix them himself. In the flash of light, he releases his magic hand. The village's protective barrier is instantly restored. The system awards him another 100 experience points for the day. He freezes, reflecting on his past actions. It is strange to remember that once he desperately rummaged through the entire castle in search of good deeds, and now he understands. Perhaps true good is simply helping people in their daily lives. The village head approaches, surprised to see him so early and even more impressed that he has already fixed the wall. Turns to her and explains that he wanted to finish before the hunt, because a few minor repairs are simply the duty of a noble lord called to protect his people. He stands awkwardly while the village elder, proudly saying she is one of his people, wishes him luck. When she prays for his success in hunting monsters, he internally rejects these wordsonly experience points from goblins are in his mind. Arriving at the site, he and his squad surveyed the goblin camp. He quickly assessed the enemy forces, the great hobgoblin leader, 2 goblin mages, and about 30 others, and on the go made a plan. Ordered the weaker members to deal with the goblins on the flanks, told Gilbert to charge into the densest part of the horde. The rest were to prevent anyone from escaping. He declared he would handle the boss himself, and Valerie confirmed the order. With the plan in mind, he activates the body enhancement spell and charges straight at the hobgoblin, and when the goblin archer aims from the cliff, he instantly casts freeze to neutralize the threat, then releases an ice ball and finishes off another. A message appears on the screen confirming the kill, but also informing about a deduction of 100 points from the gained experience, which infuriates him greatly. And gritting his teeth in irritation over the penalty points, he clears his way through the smaller goblins, his gaze firmly fixed on his main latecomer. The sudden attack caught 2 goblin mages off guard. They hastily raised a barrier, but it snorted contemptuously time for reckoning, and with one icy shot shattered their defense, killing both wizards. 2 more messages appeared on the screen, each confirming a kill, and another minus 100 points. He rushes into attack, noticing a goblin with an open back. He shoots another ice bullet, and it instantly falls. But this time the system announces a staggering experience reduction of 1,000 points. Huge fine made him freeze. He stands in shock, not believing these 1,000 points. Nearby Valerie notices that the in-battle status seems to have disappeared, so the kill counts simply as monster destruction, and Salam realizes that just a minute ago each kill only deducted 100 points, and suspects he accidentally finished off monsters trying to escape. Suddenly he understood everything. To confirm his new theory, he cast the freeze spell at another approaching goblin, and it froze in place. With this new understanding, he changes tactics, turns to his comrades, praises their efforts, and launches a wide ice spell to bind the group of goblins for their sake. And seeing the helpless goblins, Gilbert roared, ordering the monsters not to flee. His strategic turn instantly provokes a reaction. Valerie raises his voice and gathers the others, shouting that Salam left them as prey and that they must not let him down. Gilbert Schurz calls him an exemplary commander, and Nadia, addressing another squad member, makes a more critical remark saying that Salam's casting speed is impressive and far surpasses his swordsmanship, but he should better use the sword skills she teaches him. Salam eavesdrops and quietly contemplates her words. He felt his power. His magic could instantly freeze the entire horde of monsters, and in memories of the future, he even outpaced the hero in casting speed and number of spells, but consciously took the sword. Destroying them with magic would mean a large deduction of experience points. Nadia looks at him and understands without error. He deliberately does not participate in the fight himself, but focuses on training subordinates. Impressed by his foresight, she listens as he confirms her guess from now on he will entrust the fight to them, while he observes and covers from the rear. Implementing the new strategy, he makes a forward gesture, scattering the air with a flash of magic, loudly encouraging his team and urging them, "Show me that you can defeat these goblins." After the battle, his squad lines up before him. They say their moves have improved, swear to give everything to support him, and he hopes that next year in the royal capital they will still stand side by side. Gilbert and the rest are burning with excitement, although Salam barely moved and left all the work to them, and Gilbert thinks to himself whether they are secretly a group of battle fans. Later, talking with the village head, Salam explained with a heavy heart the recent discovery. It turned out that killing living beings, even harmful monsters, contradicts the philosophy of the Seeker and leads to experience point deductions, so while he levels up as a Seeker, he can no longer be proud only of his combat strength. He comes to terms with this. The system itself decides what is good and evil by its values, and they have no choice but to accept it, so he decides to look at it that way to avoid too much disappointment. This new understanding shows how important daily life in the village is. It seems that to achieve the goal one good day, every day one must truly enter the lives of the people. The family estate, Miss Marie informs him that his father has returned home, and Salam is stunned during the period before enrollment. His schedule is packed with preparation for studies. He has no time at all, and Marie simply cheerfully replies, "Wonderful." He realized that his father, Duke Bergman, is almost never at the castle due to inspections and expeditions, so if he wants to talk to him, he must do it now. But this thought was interrupted by his father's stern voice, who, asking intelligent questions, wants to shorten the time of private lessons. The father listened while Salam defiantly explained that he wants time to think for himself, not blindly follow teachers. The boy dismissed their lessons as nonsense and empty pride. The Duke responded coldly and sharply told the insolent child to know his place and do as he is told, and this reprimand stunned Salam. To this challenge the father responded not with words but with magic. A fireball burst from the air and rushed straight at Lee. The thought that priceless furniture could be destroyed threw the boy into a panic. He could not bear such a masterpiece being ruined. He reacted instantly, created an ice wall barrier to protect the room. The Duke watched fascinated. He recognized the Bergman barrier, a complex combined magic that the family had honed for generations. Activating it so lightning fast was a feat that Salam should not have mastered at 14, and then he understood. This skill was the result of memories of desperate training that Salam had already undergone. Meanwhile, Salam begged his father to take the fight outside, shouting that the furniture was considered more valuable than human lives. The Duke seemed to ignore this, noting that his son was not just empty talk, and was already preparing to strike again, when a system notification flashed in Salam's mind. His careless thought cost him 100 experience points. He cursed inwardly, convincing himself it was just a figure of speech, but the system proved merciless. Another message appeared. For his bad attitude, another 50 experience points were deducted. The boy forced himself to calm down, wiped sweat from his forehead, and decided to focus on minimizing damage to the furniture, thinking that his father had completely lost control. On the other side of the room, the Duke, whose sword blazed with fire, challenged him to cast the Bergman barrier again. The sight of his father awakened a sharp memory in him. In the future, he recalled that it was not this reckless man who succumbed to the demon's temptation and did not become the Lord of Demons. It was Salam himself. His father died a hero, fighting to protect his people from the very demon his son became. Returning to the present, Salam sighed heavily. People are so incomprehensible, he thought, and again touched part of the ice barrier just as his father lunged forward. The effort was incredible. Salam felt a wave of exhaustion and realized that even with knowledge of the future, his 14-year-old body did not have enough mana to maintain such a complex spell for long, and the father, watching this struggle, admitted to himself that the boy had clearly thought through this whole confrontation. Having assessed everything to himself, he could not hold back and burst into loud laughter. The Duke praised Salam for carefully covering the nearby documents, said that in him were both the appearance and character of his mother Erica, and from his father he only got the voice, and with that the trial ended. He left. He exhales with relief, a small knowing smile playing on his face. He thinks it's good that his father can be swayed by a show of force. Now that the quarrel is behind him, he finally feels he has gained time to level up and decides. From tomorrow he will go to the city and try to talk to people. Grateful that his strict mother is currently absent, this is a step forward. On the noisy city street, Salam Bergman walks confidently, enjoying his secret stroll. He believes that his disguise as a commoner without guards and in ordinary clothes will perfectly help him blend into the crowd. He quietly rejoices in his success. The secret operation succeeded. He recalls ordering the maid Marie not to let anyone into his room so that no one would notice he slipped out. With a jerk, a transparent screen materializes before him, showing the daily quest from the system to do one good deed. He knows that, like heir for the Duke, his actions are limited, but to complete the task, he will have to interact with townspeople. This is part of his desperate plan. He recalls his past life. At 17, he succumbed to the demon's temptation, became the Lord of Demons, and was eventually destroyed by a hero. Having spent decades as a bodiless soul, watching his kingdom crumble, he miraculously returned to the body of a 14-year-old teenager. Then a mysterious system appeared, ordering him to raise his seeker level, avoid evil, and harden his heart, and now he is determined to avoid that terrible fate at any cost. With this determination, he understands that the only way forward is to follow the system's prompts and level up. He notices an old woman struggling to carry a bucket of water, sees his chance, approaches, and offers to carry the heavy burden, but his sudden appearance frightens her, and she asks who he is. He agrees. He carries the bucket. A message pops up on the screen: daily task completed, and he is credited with a bunch of experience points. He realizes, communicating with commoners really turns out to be the key. The woman glances at him, sees that he is free, and suggests as if nothing else that he clean her house. Without waiting for an answer, she hands him a fluffy dust brush. When he asks what it is and she sees his blank look, she instantly understands that he really doesn't know, and mutters to herself, wondering what kind of sheltered life he must have lived. He takes the unfamiliar object and examines it closely. After a moment of thought, he realizes that the fabric part is used for gently sweeping dust. With a new but mistaken idea, he attacks the dust with energetic swings and immediately fills the room with thick, suffocating clouds. She coughs, unable to hide her irritation, and shouts that she told him to be gentle. She points to the layer of dust in the high, unreachable corners where he can't reach. Seeing the problem, he announces that he is going to borrow the neighboring table. Instead of using the table to become taller, he begins carefully wiping its surface with the fluffy brush, and the woman looks on in complete astonishment, not understanding what he is doing at all. He addresses the elderly woman simply and asks for an extra container. She sighs heavily, visibly irritated, corrects him, says her name is Amanda and he shouldn't address her like that, but though angry, she hands him a small pot. With a flourish, he shows his magically enhanced cleaning tool, which gathered all the dust in the room into a neat pile on the cloth, and loudly announces that the job is done. Amanda watches, not impressed at all by this display. The dust settled neatly in the container. Amanda suddenly froze in surprise and exclaimed whether he was some kind of mage who crafts tools. He shrugged indifferently, says it's a hobby, but she was confident in his skill and insisted that he must come with her. She rushed into the nearest shop, calling Johan. The gray-haired gentleman with a mustache warmly greeted Grandma Amanda, then asked with interest about the handsome young man she had brought. Without any introduction, Amanda pointed to a large old rusty metal box and sternly ordered Salim to fix it, and he, confused by this sudden command, looked at the neglected device. He inspects the mechanism and, admitting he poorly understands its insides, still instantly finds the problem. The magical inscription simply faded. He says that by gathering, making it vibrate, and enhancing the mana, you can restore it. The device came back to life again, and Amanda joyfully exclaimed that it was fixed. Johan sincerely thanked him, explaining that the apparatus was old and they could not afford a replacement. A message appeared before Salam. He repaired the magical tool, gained 100 EXP, and leveled up. Excitement was bubbling. Amanda exclaimed that this was a reason to celebrate. They would have a karaoke night, which they hadn't done for a long time, and immediately grabbed the phone to call the neighbors. Salim was completely confused by the word karaoke, when the shop filled with other elderly people who were bubbling with impatience to have fun. Another system message announced that for returning joy to the old man, he received an additional 500 EXP, and he could only watch this bustle in amazement, pondering the strange ways ordinary people entertain themselves. Later, another woman approached Amanda's house and asked if something was wrong. Amanda shifted her gaze to Salim and directly questioned him, saying that it was already the third day since he appeared here, and whether he was just a bored rich man with a strange hobby. He denied, and simply said he was trying to level up. He tried to explain his goal to do one good deed every day. Amanda, still puzzled by his words about leveling up, listened with a skeptical expression. She warned that the day's task might be too difficult for a spoiled young gentleman, but still asked what he meant. Amanda did not answer simply and led him to the registration desk, behind which sat another woman. She, casting a curious glance, asked why she brought such a handsome boy, and Amanda declared decisively that Salim would take her place in the day program and ordered the woman to register him. She responded with a stern shout, "We clean the gutters," and he thought it was community cleaning day, a hard duty for Amanda, who lived alone, but he saw in it a great opportunity to truly help the town residents and fulfill his daily mission. So with new determination, he decided to do the job well. Deciding to finish the task quickly, he summoned earth magic. A powerful clay wave burst from beneath the ground and instantly pulled all the silt and dirt from the gutters in a huge whirl, and those present froze in amazement. In an instant, the work was done. Holding a huge ball of collected trash in the air with his magic, he turned to the woman at the reception and asked where to throw it. Surprised, she only pointed to the neighboring vacant lot. With just a slight nod, he cleaned up the trash, and a pop-up window appeared with a success message. 100 EXP for cleaning the city and another 500 EXP for the daily quest, a total of 680 out of 1,000 for his current level. He returned to Amanda and handed her a small prize for participating, and the old woman, looking confused, noticed that his clothes were completely clean. He explained that he had wrapped a thin protective layer around himself to avoid getting dirty, as it was necessary caution so that the family would not find out about his affairs. She sighed and handed him a cookie from the prize pack, insisting that he deserved it. He decisively refused, not hungry. The work was done, time to go. His contemptuous attitude finally exhausted her patience. Crushing the cookie in her fist, she exploded with anger, shouted at the ungrateful brat, and her sudden outburst of rage completely stunned him. Previously, he always got lost from the sudden anger of the old woman. Holding the raised cookie tray, he realized that he could not do even one good deed a day, so it became clear. He needed to learn the manners of ordinary people and simply follow her instructions, while Amanda was furious and demanded to know why he could not at least smile and give something simple. She continued the lecture, explaining that when someone does something for you, you simply accept it and say thank you, that's how it works. Taking her words to heart, he hesitantly bit the cookie and, to his surprise, found that it was actually quite tasty. He chewed thoughtfully. A new idea was ripening in his mind, so saying thank you seemed important. He froze, wondering if it was some kind of trick, a secret to get along with ordinary people. This realization shed new light on his recent adventures. He helped Amanda clean the gutter, but she never thanked him, only shouted for him to go home. At the same time, he remembered how he helped other people with leaking roofs and various troubles, step by step gaining experience and leveling up, and now it became clear to him, Amanda was a skilled, strong woman who knew how to build strong connections in her community. When the new year came, Salam Bergman, who was now 15 years old, became the de facto city handyman. Cleaning became a trivial matter, and as soon as he finished work at Amanda's house, a bunch of notifications appeared before him. He gained experience, completed the daily good deed, and most amazingly, rose from -1 all the way to level 2. He shouted a victorious cry, filled with joy, finally escaped the negative levels, but his celebration was instantly cut off by Amanda's rough voice nearby. "You are too loud." Despite her tone, she handed him an apple and suggested celebrating his luck. He took the apple and simply said thank you, and Amanda noted that for a person who always seemed to have their head in the clouds, he was finally present. He took a bite. A blissful smile blossomed on his face. It was like paradise. While he ate, thoughts in his head were already counting level increases. He was tracking experience, so he did not expect this. From -1, he suddenly jumped to the second, completely skipping the first. It seemed the threshold for levels had changed, and he realized that while this was easy now, it would definitely become harder later. In the system menu, he saw an unread message: a new skill unlocked, healing minor cuts and bruises. He wanted to try it on himself, but knew his own powerful magic would instantly heal such a trifle, so curious if this was a different skill, he turned to Amanda to see if she knew anyone with a small injury whom he could heal. She snorted, saying there were few master healers, but then suddenly thought and added that with him, probably anything was possible. Just as he wanted to say more, she suddenly acted with a quick, purposeful movement. She ran a small knife across her own palm and made a shallow cut. His eyes widened in shock when she showed the bleeding wound and calmly said, "Look, just a little one," and he only stammered, horrified at the thought that she had really hurt herself because of him. He looked confusedly at the bleeding hand. According to the system, he had the ability to heal, but this new skill did not respond within him, unlike his usual magic, where he instinctively felt how to move mana. Amanda urged him on, but he had no idea where to start. A semi-transparent screen appeared before his eyes with a simple question: "A wound detected that can be healed. Do you want to heal it? Yes, no." It dawned on him. The system activates the skill itself. When he mentally agreed, the cut on Amanda's hand instantly closed, and she calmly noted that it worked. She immediately noticed his experience points had not increased at all. He guessed that healing intentionally inflicted wounds probably did not count. Amanda suggested a solution: find someone with real wounds, and immediately named a place. Children playing in the vacant lot nearby were always covered in scratches. While they walked, he summoned his status screen. It said Selene Bergman, male, 15 years old. Seeker, level 2, experience to next level 90,300. He also saw new lines about MP and healing mastery. System explanations were always vague, so he decided to figure out what these numbers meant, and at that moment, Amanda announced their arrival. Their path led to a group of noisy children. One noticed Amanda with Salam and teased with a joke about a handsome guy, for which an older man nearby sharply barked for the child not to say such nonsense. His attention was immediately drawn to a small boy who stumbled and scratched his knee. Again, a system prompt appeared. Detecting another wound that could be healed, Salam approached the child and asked to look. The other children watched him, and someone whispered that he was creepy. He accepted the request, and the boy's wound instantly disappeared. The child looked down, stunned that it no longer hurt. A system message confirmed the result. 100 experience points added. The surprised boy looked up at Salam, called him a good big brother, and asked his name. At the boy's naive question, Salam suddenly realized. In 2 months with Amanda, she had never once asked his name. Amanda calmly replied that by the rules one must first introduce oneself, then ask others, which he had never done, and the child noted that it was awkward without a name, so he should at least invent a fake one. Suddenly he was struck. His eyes lit up with inspiration. He pointed to himself and with new confidence declared, "It's gone by." Announcing his new identity gone by, he addressed the other children and told the wounded to show him their injuries. They eagerly rushed to him, and for each healed child a message 100 EXP appeared on the screen. The level jumped from second to fourth in moments, and Amanda, watching this, observed for a moment and then decided. It's time to go home. The efforts paid off. A glance at the status showed that now he was Salam Bergman, a 15-year-old seeker of the 4th level. His magical power MP was 920 out of a maximum possible 7,691, and his healing skill reached an impressive 97. Lying in bed, he finally caught a moment of silence and understood. MP is just a number that shows his magical power. The system itself activated skills, consuming this energy like any other magic. And by healing children, he finally unlocked the ability to use these skills and grasped their true meaning. But this new understanding raised even more questions. Does the MP indicator mean his maximum magical potential? Without any reference point, he did not know whether his current power reserve was large or small. Then he thought about the practical application of his power and the efficiency of magic. Healing his own minor wounds barely consumed energy, but the skill to heal others was incredibly inefficient. He recalled how quickly his MP was depleted when healing light injuries of 10 people. Suddenly a troubling thought flashed in his mind. If healing even such minor wounds on a large scale takes half of his maximum MP, then this skill is essentially useless for serious use. The realization made him shudder sharply in bed, and then exhaustion took over and he dozed off. Even as he succumbed to sleep, his mind swarmed with options. He imagined the worst-case scenario, but quickly decided to seek the answer on his own. A new theory appeared. Perhaps the key lies in the level of mastery of the healing skill. If raised, the magic could become more effective. In the last clear moment, he understood his path forward, and the real test would begin tomorrow. Salam Bergman, known to the local children as Gambii, returned to check on them and ask if anyone was hurt, but the children happily said he had healed everyone yesterday, and his status as a level 5 seeker with high healing mastery was the best proof of these recent efforts. He froze, seeing his worried expression, and admitted he came to test his skills. The children asked if he was not just trying to look good by looking for someone to heal, and one of them advised him to look into other places where the locals gather. His confusion made the children explain that among ordinary boys there are their own territories. They cannot enter foreign land, but they said that Gone By can go wherever he wants, and he was stunned by this discovery. Continuing to work among them, he felt how each healing brought a real reward, experience points that pushed him further along the path. That evening, returning to his room, he pondered his progress. During the day he had healed 10 children, and felt that with the growth of his mastery in using mana, it had become much more effective. He decided to focus on his path and hoped to discover even more useful healing skills. This routine lasted several days. He patrolled the outskirts, step by step, relentlessly approaching the 10th level, when suddenly a figure in a hood appeared before him, sharply asking if he was the one who heals people in these parts. Those figures were from the church. The children whispered that the church only heals the rich. The main woman declared that healing is the sacred art of the church, and since he was not a member, he was encroaching on it. She extended an invitation to join, promising a special baptism in the proper place among their ranks. The answer was immediate and unequivocal: I refuse. In his soul, he laughed at the very thought of joining an organization that would take experience points for a simple donation. The church women behaved with open contempt, asking if he understood what power he was challenging. It turned out that under the mask was the eldest son of the ducal house. Instead, his eyes flashed. He raised his hand and summoned a complex magical seal that issued a single, incredibly powerful command. The sudden surge of power stunned the women cold, pierced the air as they felt the incredible magical might bursting from him. One of them trembled and whispered that perhaps this was not the place for a confrontation, and their feigned bravery crumbled. After displaying his power, Salam watched as the children he had healed burst into applause. One shouted how awesome it was, another how pleasant it had been. He breathed a sigh of relief, realizing he had resorted to magic, and hoped he had not scared them. The next day he was again among the children, and a warm calm filled him. His calm shattered when in an alley several figures in dark robes cornered him. One of them said they were agents of the church and that he must quietly come with them, and Salam instantly understood everything. He immediately notices they are in a dim alley, away from prying eyes, all in black obviously hiding their faces, and that was enough for him to understand everything. He decides if they find out who he really is, he must make sure no one spreads it. With a sharp movement he utters a spell, shouting ice wall barrier. The agents froze in surprise, and Selim approached them fivefold and coldly said, "Can you answer if something happens to him, since he is a member of the Bergman family?" The agents retreat. One recognized the face of the young master. They flee, and Selim watches them go with relief that they left only under threat, and thinks that a real fight might have earned him experience points, so the church clearly decided to control everyone who learns to heal. During the treatment of another child's wound, a notification suddenly appeared. He gained 100 experience points, leveled up to level 10, acquired a new skill, and even received a new message. The child thanked him. He flinched a little, and happy to have reached level 10, decided to check the details later. Returning to his room, he pondered the new skill. It only restores stamina and does not cure diseases, so it is difficult to apply effectively. Therefore, he decided to follow the system's hints, level up, and harden his mind to avoid the worst future he remembers. Suddenly Amanda appears. She heard him. She exclaims excitedly that he can heal people, then clarifies her understanding. You can only help them restore stamina. She also sees that stamina matters. After that, Selena flew into Grandpa Johan's workshop, apologizing for the intrusion. He immediately addressed Amanda, recognized her as the one who fixed his magical device, and asked if her granddaughter was not in the back room. Both Johan and Amanda jumped at such a sudden appearance and questions. She bursts into the room and calls Zafi. Old Amanda quickly calms him and whispers that the granddaughter has not been feeling better for several days. The weak young woman apologizes from the bed, too tired even to sit up, and a request materializes before him, offering a chance to help restore stamina. He accepts the hint and a faint glow envelops the room. Zafi gets up, confused, touches her face and exclaims that she suddenly feels much better. The onlookers froze in shock. Johan excitedly asks if he can cure diseases, but Salim explains that his ability only temporarily restores strength, and a message confirms that he gained experience for his action. Later, while Salim quietly sips from a mug, Johan tells, "This is Grelna disease, an insidious infection common among the poor and affecting those with low magical resistance." He says that Zafi is a poor girl whom her husband kicked out after she got sick, and now she has no one to rely on except him. He continues, his face gloomy, describing it as a cruel disease that slowly exhausts its victims to death. Johan explains that great magical power among common people is rare, but it is their only defense, and he earnestly appeals to Salim. Will he continue to use his magic to ease his granddaughter's suffering? The shopkeeper's voice breaks with emotion. He rejects the idea of payment, says he will sell the shop himself if necessary, and shouts that Zofi is their only joy in life. He calmly replies that he does not need money, explains that healing gives him experience for him, that is already sufficient reward. He smiles gently and says that Amanda's happiness is the most important, and the emotionally overwhelmed Johan sincerely thanks him, his voice full of gratitude. The treatment continued. Zafi is seen outside. She is cheerfully digging snow. Amanda exclaimed, surprised and happy to see her so alive. Zafi turned smiling and agreed that she is almost not sick, all thanks to him. Selena, looking at her, gently explains to Amanda that his skill does not cure the disease outright, it only supports her stamina, giving the body a chance to fight off the ailment itself. He says he himself has never been sick, but assumes that the nobility recover faster due to great magical power, and Amanda finds this quite understandable. Suddenly, a new message flashed before his eyes. The disease was completely cured. He was awarded 1,000 experience points, and at that very moment, Zafi triumphantly clenched her fist, joking whether she was really healed, and warmly thanked him. It turns out to be true. Selim looks at the system interface and confirms that she is indeed fully healed. Zafi froze without words, her eyes wide open in disbelief, tears gathering on her eyelids, and Amanda exclaimed in amazement from the door she had overheard this amazing news. She ran out happy, sincerely thanking him and promising to tell her grandfather about this miracle. As the young woman walked away, Amanda explained to Selena that grandfather Johann Skob's had long become a regular meeting place for families of people suffering from chronic illness, and Selena listened with a thoughtful expression on his face. He stood before the gathered families and explained directly, his skill is endurance support, and whether a person recovers depends entirely on their own resilience. The man organizing the group nodded in understanding, said they would help, and suggested starting with the houses closest to the store. As they walked, Amanda whispered the truth to him. She had already told Zafi about his endurance support, but was still afraid to tell everyone. She believed that if there was even the slightest chance that people could recover, they needed to give them this hope. He got to work moving from one sickbed to another, and with each person he helped, a wave of energy surged through him and he gained experience. Families looked on with hope in their eyes, and after the third patient he felt a surge of power. He leveled up and gained a new skill, and then realized that even when healing is not guaranteed, hope itself makes a huge difference. He thoughtfully pondered the new skill. The skill disease healing can be countered by immunity, but the very name hinted that it was worth trying immediately. 3 patients remained, and he began to worry about his magical power reserve, but decided to ask the last patient if he could try. He continued to support the endurance of the next 2 patients, gaining more experience. The description of his new skill would not leave his mind. It was supposed to cause a rapid change in the patient's condition and consume their endurance. The wording sounded ominous, and it was hard for him to believe that the system would give him a completely useless skill. After treating the last patient, a young woman named Laura, the effect was immediate. She sat up in bed, her palms clenched from a sudden surge of energy, and she exclaimed that it was like a miracle, to the great surprise of her family. Her father rushed to her, filled with joy, and Laura suggested making tea. Salam quickly warned her not to overexert herself, reminding her that endurance recovery does not mean full recovery. To himself, he assessed the remainder of his magic and realized he could try the new skill, after which he announced that he had a proposal. Then he whispered that perhaps there was a way to cure her disease. Immediately these words hung in the air, and the father and daughter froze in stunned silence. The question was asked by Johan. Why hadn't he mentioned this when treating Zafi? Salam explained that he had only recently mastered this skill, constantly using his other powers. Then he gave a grim warning. This method would cause sharp changes and quickly exhaust endurance. Maybe, he finished with a grim expression, it will be painful. He apologizes for the suddenness of the proposal and promises to return tomorrow to support her endurance. But young Laura is determined, endures the pain, and says she wants to recover as soon as possible. In response to his apology, she, through tears, explains that the illness has hurt from the very beginning and moreover, she does not want to continue being a burden to her husband, and he tries to calm her down, saying that they can give themselves time. Despite his words of comfort, the man asks Salam if there really is a faster way to recover, even if it means more pain. Laura adds, begging. In Salam's mind, confirmation instantly flashes the disease can be cured by manipulating immunity. Seeing their determination, he agrees to try. As soon as he started, Laura let out a devastating scream, and a flood of information rushed into his consciousness. Her endurance is melting from a harsh immune reaction that cripples the body, so the system itself combines his ability to nourish endurance and heal, and orders him not to move more than 10 meters away from her. The sudden crisis threw the room into panic. Her husband shouted, asking if she would be okay. Old Amanda noticed that the fever had sharply risen and rushed to get something to cool her down, and Salam could only watch as the treatment unfolded on his lips. He grits his teeth, overwhelmed with self-blame. He admits to himself that he wanted to test this ability, but now fears that he trusted the unfamiliar system too much. The thought that it might be a devilish creation arises in his mind, but he recalls that the system always pushes towards good deeds, so he decides to resist temptation and change the future, even if for now he just has to follow its instructions. The internal struggle is interrupted by Laura's husband, who says it is already late and worries that soon Salam's absence will be noticed in the castle, but Salam knows he cannot leave her now. He stands by the bed, gripped by deep anxiety, a feeling he has not known since he survived the nightmare with the demon. Clenching his fist, he whispered Laura's name. Her husband notices his agitation, and Selena can only watch, hoping that his magic will be enough. The healing ability is fully controlled by the system, so he is powerless to intervene. The tense night recedes, and as soon as morning comes, Laura suddenly sits up sharply, apologizes for waking everyone, and joyfully offers to prepare breakfast. Her sudden recovery astonishes those present, and her husband, shouting her name, asks if she is really okay. She spoke and the final message confirmed it. The disease is completely cured. He received 1,000 experience points. He noticed that she seemed to have recovered, and Laura confirmed this, adding that, except for a little weakness, she feels absolutely wonderful. He turned to leave, but Laura's father rushed forward, sincerely apologizing for once doubting him, and tried to shove a bag of money into his hands, the very same they had been saving for the church. Salam refused, saying he already had more than enough, and when the treatment ended, he simply announced that he was returning, quietly rejoicing that the girl was cured, and asked to be left alone. Grateful father, with tears in his eyes, thanks again for saving Laura, and insists that if Salam ever needs anything, he will do everything to help. Salam mentally understands that he really needs nothing from the man, but looking at the sincere peasant, considers the offer and replies that if a need arises, he will let him know. His decision is prompted by the memory of a man's advice. If someone offers help, just accept it, and following this wisdom seems right. With a small, sincere smile, he solemnly accepts the promise. Good, he says. If I ever need something, I will ask. The father is filled with gratitude, and at that moment the bond in him begins to grow a heart. Salam squints and sees the maid Mari, who is crying with a letter in her hands. She calls him by name, grateful that he finally woke up, and he, still sleepy, recognizes her and understands it is already morning. Waking up, he relives yesterday's confrontation again. The father, Duke Bergman, growled at him, demanding to know what he was doing, and reproaching him for not having a sense of how to maintain the atmosphere of the ducal house, and Salam only stammered, saying that he was helping people in the city. The memory of his father's anger cuts, but even more striking is the physical reality. He sits down, shocked, and realizes that he must not have slept all night, spending magic to maintain the ice barrier. The magic reserves are almost exhausted, and now it is clear to him that he fainted from exhaustion after raising the barrier and enduring his father's attacks. Alms leaned back on the pillows, turning his attention to the present and to Mari. He asked if he had caused her trouble, but she quickly reassured him she was fine, taking care of him was her job, and she asked him not to bow to anyone because of her position. Tender words of reassurance made him pause for a moment. Being the heir of the ducal family, he understands that maybe it is time to stop sneaking around, because if he acts on his own and causes trouble, his guardian Mari and others might get into trouble and be punished for it. New determination will soon be tested on the training field. The father stands before him and says that he has finally woken up. The Duke notes that if he had not forgiven Salam's mistake yesterday, the boy would be dead, gives a second chance, but clearly says to regain his trust, Salam now has to show his strength. It is time to respond. With a shout at the start, the Duke rushed forward and at that moment closed the distance. The sudden attack forces Salam to rely on pure instinct and desperately dodge. He realizes that his father is using physical enhancement magic, so he must continue to dodge and maintain the barrier. A direct confrontation would exhaust his already meager mana, as before. The Duke growls at him to stop dodging and fighting, and to emphasize the demand, creates a huge fireball. The fiery projectile rushes straight at him. He is confident he will dodge, but suddenly a terrible thought pierces him. There are servants in the castle, so he raises the ice barrier, knowing it can withstand one fireball, but his magic is already dangerously depleted, and he strains, realizing that exhausted mana will not withstand his father's power. Despite his strength melting away, the barrier held, and this did not go unnoticed. The Duke smiled and said it turned out quite well. He warned Salam not to show weakness, because one wrong move could be a disaster. And then, to the boy's surprise, the father rarely praised, "You have grown strong, Salam." He confesses, a few weeks ago a church messenger came to them who wanted to take Salam, saying he had the gift of healing magic. The Duke explains that he refused their impudent, persistent offer, and when Salam did not return 2 nights in a row, he suspected that the boy had gone to the church. Salam is stunned and cannot understand what they were thinking, approaching the Duke's home. He prefers not to ask directly whether he really knows how to use healing magic, and admits that he almost fired a fireball at the front door. Embarrassed, Salam explains that he can heal minor wounds and illnesses, but that is not magic, it is a healing skill, and in his thoughts he laments the hassle of the system and quietly curses the church members. The Duke waved his hand with contempt, saying that healing magic is a useless thing for nobles, accused Salam of sneaking out of the palace not out of mercy, but to feed his own ego by listening to commoners' pure hypocrisy. Salam thought that although his father's words were harsh, they probably reflected the opinion of most of the nobility. Healing magic is rare, only cures minor ailments, and has no value for high nobles because they can heal themselves. He knows that his ambitions are much greater. The real goal is to gain experience by taking on as many healing cases as possible. He believes that with enough practice his skill will be able to heal even wounds too severe for natural recovery, something no mage in the entire country can do now. With determination in his eyes, Salam declares that as the firstborn of the ducal house, he will definitely achieve this one day. His father, noticing his confidence, only says, "Do as you wish," seeing no point in restraining him, and when the Duke returns, he thinks that this might be a bluff, but if the system has not marked the boy's words as a lie, maybe it is really achievable. Now that his tutoring schedule has changed, he can finally walk openly around the city. Sitting at a table covered with books, Salam decides to study medicine and pharmacology from the very beginning. He recalls how he healed Laura, and realizes that although his healing skill works automatically through the system, blindly relying on it without proper knowledge is too dangerous. It turned out to be more difficult than he expected. Medicine is the church's business, so finding a teacher became a real obstacle. He has no acquaintances among influential nobles or apothecaries. He asked for a mentor, but was sharply refused because he had no intention of joining the church at all. He reasons that common people are the most vulnerable to diseases, so it is worth visiting shops where the sick gather. Just then, a loud rumble and cries are heard outside the idea sparks. To ask Amanda, the apothecary, to teach him. He finds an old woman who hisses in shock, probably saying, "Johan sent you." She confirms that she used to be an apothecary but is now retired and does not understand why he needs her help since he healed the disease of the Herald, which even she could not handle. Salam explains that his skills can heal diseases, but using them without the necessary knowledge is dangerous. Amanda, with eyes acknowledging his correctness, warns that pharmacology requires decades of devoted work, but she also admits, letting a person with such power go without a mentor is a great misfortune. Hating to interfere, she reluctantly agrees to teach him what she can, but only while he is in the city and refuses to leave. Salam, filled with joy, sincerely and generously thanks her. She apologizes for the deception and formally introduces herself as Selena Bergman, and the eldest son of Duke Bergman, lord of this region. Amanda says is not surprised, saying that most already guessed his high status because of that huge mana, adding that since people considered him gone by eye, they behaved accordingly. Commoners still do not know proper etiquette for the nobility. Then Selena asks if she will continue to call him gone by eye now that she is his student. Amanda agrees to make their master and student relationship official. Salam, in turn, asks to continue being treated as Gandhea because it is important for him to observe how common people live and grow. Embarrassed, Amanda notes what a strange son of a lord he is. When everything is settled, Amanda asks where to start. Salam frankly says he wants to learn to heal ailments and thinks that wound healing and disease treatment obey the same laws as physical enhancement. Amanda thoughtfully admits that she retired long ago and does not know how many sick people there are now, so she decides to find patients herself. Later, Salam appears before his new followers. Reports 15 of them successfully passed the recent entrance exam to the Royal First Academy of Magic. Together with those already admitted, his retinue now numbers 22 people. This news throws Gilbert into a panic. He is desperate because they are losing to the Lovier faction. It has 24 members, while Marquis Sarmiento has only 16, and he is shocked that more than half of their candidates failed, and Valerie didn't even try to take the exam. Selim calmly encourages his people, don't worry about the numbers. You passed, and his kind words move them. In his mind, he thinks that the strict military past of the Lovier family and their passion for hunting prepare the family members well for difficult school exams, and he knows. It is these disappointments and small cracks in the fighting spirit that demons exploit. Then he turns his attention to Valerie and Gilbert, says he doesn't care about the sizes of other noble factions, asks for their help, and admits that he has learned to heal the sick. He entrusts Valerie to find the sick around the capital, explaining that he wants to hone his healing skills by treating as many patients as possible. Valerie enthusiastically agrees, but secretly suspects Salim's true motives and decides to be cautious. With this new directive, Salam was able to continue studying pharmacology under Amanda's guidance and with the help of his assistants. Gilbert, full of new determination, encourages others, and everyone willingly helps their lord, while Salam looks at them thoughtfully. The training truly began. He and Amanda side by side treated many patients and most often encountered two diseases: Greln's disease, which affected people with weak magic and immunity, and Zaren's disease, which affects children. Amanda explained that Zaren is also called the Trial of 10, a ritual every child must undergo, but which takes a terrifying number of lives. He arrived at the shelter where the disease outbreak was raging. Sitting by a child's bed, he got to work, and the old director stood stunned. He could not comprehend that Salam Sama, a nobleman who had already made donations to them, was now treating patients himself. A small, seemingly healthy girl peeked in at the door nearby. The little girl entered the room and eagerly asked if everyone would recover. The senior caregiver anxiously asked if it was safe for her there, but Salam reassured them everything is fine. He explained that the fact that the child walks during the outbreak means either great magical power or strong immunity, and that he had already said, some children, even from nobility, ran, but recover without showing any symptoms. He noticed the girl, thinking that if the disease is so widespread, then this child is probably also affected. A soft glow quietly shone from his palm as he directed his magic at her to check her condition. The girl gasped in surprise and suddenly exclaimed that her body had become incredibly light. Salam's diagnosis was confirmed as he expected. Even without showing symptoms, the disease had still exhausted her strength. She impatiently asked if this meant they could all play together again. Salam smiled and promised that the other children would soon feel better, just like her. He asked her to encourage them, saying her support would help them recover faster. Nearby in the bed, another boy mumbled that he was glad. He was not the only one who did not feel pain and really wanted to be with everyone. Salam froze. It seemed strange to him that a child could say such a thing, as if the boy would rather suffer together with his friends than be healthy alone. The little girl, sobbing, explained that one of the sick was her best friend. She just wanted her to recover as soon as possible so they could play together again. She sincerely understood this. Salam knelt down and gently placed his hand on her head, promising that it would be so. Later, Salam took on another patient, a young man. Although he had seen many cases, he realized that some diseases simply do not respond to immune system influence. He managed to disable the skin, but the persistent numbness in the leg remained. This ailment did not yield to his methods, and the young man despairingly asked if he would never recover. Suddenly Amanda burst in, shouting that there would be no arguments, and forcibly shoved a spoonful of green juice into the protesting young man's mouth, stating that this is what happens when you don't eat real food. The man burped and whispered that it was disgusting, and Amanda sharply cut him off, saying she had to do it. The project had already been announced publicly, and he could not get sick now. Salam stood confused and asked what was going on. The young man admitted that he was already feeling better, and Amanda explained to Salam. That man had made a scene in the tavern performing a stunt, eating only buns for a whole year to attract attention. She instructively noted that when the diet is disrupted, the body becomes unstable, and this leads to a bunch of problems, and Salam absorbed this new information, understanding that the world is full of strange diseases he still needed to understand. Soon he encountered another extraordinary situation. In despair, a woman explained that her husband, despite her warnings, had eaten monster meat bought from a suspicious trader and begged Salam to look because it was extremely serious. Approaching the bed, he saw the man lying unconscious. Amanda was already nearby and explained that part of the monster meat is edible and another part can cause fatal food poisoning. While the wife sobbed, Salam realized that this disease did not respond to his current abilities and, filled with despair, whispered Amanda's name. Although the prognosis was grim, Amanda immediately sprang into action, told Selene that the primary task was to restore the man's strength, gave medicine for monster meat poisoning, and frankly admitted that they would only slightly increase his chances of recovery, but better that than nothing. As soon as the medicine took effect, a message appeared in his mind: the disease could now be treated. He gasped in shock, realizing that he could now manipulate immunity to cure that man, and his sudden reaction completely confused Amanda and the wife. After successful treatment, the grateful couple, with relief and excitement in their voices, explained the importance of what had happened. The wife said that although these medicines are known for their ability to neutralize poisons, many people still died after taking them, but thanks to Salam's power, they now had proof these medicines really help cleanse the body. He listened with a smile, understanding that he would have to study even harder to effectively combine medicines with his healing ability. Then he aloud wondered what the active substance in Amanda's mixture was. Amanda, with a sparkle in her eyes, explained that it is extracted from the poisonous glands of a frog-like monster. Supposedly, poison is treated with poison. She added that since such a monster can only be found in the lands of Bergman, the medicines there are extremely valuable, and seeing his interest, she offered to teach him how to prepare them before leaving for the capital. He laughed quietly and said that she was like a witch from a fairy tale, an image that suited her very well. He thought that having learned so many things from Amanda, his own level was gradually increasing. Returning to the room, he immediately saw that everything had been converted into numbers. Messages appeared one after another on the screen, congratulating him on reaching level 30 and completing the initial training. The reward was a new bathing skill, and a new main quest appeared to reach level 50 to awaken the holy attribute and neutralize the dark one. He ran his eyes over his increasingly long list of skills. He noticed their rarity, but also that they were hardly useful anywhere. He estimated, at this pace, about 3 months to level 50. And his life would soon change when he entered the Royal Capital Academy. His determination was rock solid. To gain the power needed to fight demons, he needed to level up even more. He stood in the luxurious hall of the estate with a small bouquet of roses in his hands, and all the maids gathered to say goodbye to him. Finally, the day of his departure had come. He thanked one of the servants for taking such good care of him, and through tears she wished the young master happiness, saying how happy she was to have served him. The children he had healed from that ailment also joined in and thanked him for trusting them, but he modestly waved off their gratitude. While he was speaking, a young man named Nadia approached and handed him a single poppy flower. Nadia asked if he remembered the promise from the distant past and said he needed a favor. Salam agreed without hesitation and promised to do everything he could. The crowd grew as Amanda and other villagers with flowers approached and began thanking him for everything. The children he saved called him Your Highness and praised him for healing everyone in the town, and he felt they were exaggerating a bit, mentally noting that people who heal without expecting anything in return are truly rare. His gaze stuck on a small, slightly wilted flower that one of the children had handed him. The child asked if he had picked it from Amanda's garden for him, and Salam painfully realized how long that child had probably stood there waiting to give it to him. Moved by their shared gratitude, he gathered all the flowers into a huge, bright bouquet, considered it a valuable gift, and hoped it would not wither. A message about important support flashed on the screen, as if the system itself was celebrating his departure. Holding the bouquet in his hands, he turned to the crowd, thanked everyone, and announced, "I am leaving." At the first Academy of Magic of the Royal Capital, the new year begins with trembling anticipation. The heir to the throne herself is entering the school, and powerful nobles from across the country send their children in hopes that they will become her close companions. Among them is Salam Bergman, standing alongside his peers, ready to begin his studies. The contract ceremony finally ended. Gilbert sighed with relief, and Valeria was already thinking about the food at the welcome party. She noticed that Salam seemed familiar with the academy and asked if he had been here before. Salam confirmed. Although this was his first time here in this life, overall it was already his second enrollment. He had memories of a future that had already passed. He recalled that terrible future. In the winter of his second year, he succumbed to the demon's temptation, became the Lord of Demons, and because of this died at the hero's hand. With his power he destroyed the kingdom, his body scattered into black mist, his soul was devoured for over 10 years, and when the last fragment was almost gone, he woke up in the body of a 14-year-old boy even before he entered the academy. His second chance came with a new directive. Upon arriving at the royal capital, the mysterious system assigned him a task to resist the demon's temptation. Although he did not understand this, he now follows the system, leveling himself up to strengthen his will and harden his heart before the coming darkness. Preparations to avert that fate began a week before the entrance ceremony. He and others entering the academy arrived at the vast estate of the Houseburden family. There, Gilbert admired the luxurious mansion, while Selina waved her hand, calling it the pride of the Duke, and asked his companions not to hold back. Requesting their help to train his healing skills, Valerie gladly agreed. Later at the estate, Valeria introduced him to two people, a man who had served the estate for many years, and a woman from a merchant family connected to the Duke's court. They were tasked with finding patients, and Valeria advised that due to the church's great influence in the capital, treatment and training were better done secretly. Under the cover of night, Salam thanked them for these arrangements. Although they planned to stay unnoticed, the woman immediately broke the silence, stammering. She said they had already found a person desperately in need of help, and it was still daytime. When Salam asked what was wrong, she explained that she could not treat but could examine the symptoms, and Salam, indifferent to the time, decisively declared, "Let's go immediately." As they set off, he recognized the disease from his previous life, poisoning from spoiled monster meat, which often claimed lives. He recalled how, on Amanda's advice, he had treated her in his lands, and knowing that poor peasants could not afford medicine, he decided to bring them the medicine immediately. When they entered a neglected part of the city, their guide apologized to Nero for the lack of carriages, and they walked past cracked walls and damaged roofs. Salam noticed this was a poor district, and even ordinary people on the Duke's lands lived better, so he realized. He would have to conserve magical power for healing. Patching buildings with earth magic would have to be postponed. He looks at the peasants suffering, their moans filling the cramped room. He immediately recognizes the symptoms. They are the same as those that afflicted Amanda. In his past life, he would never have paid attention to such a place, but now he understands. The cracks in society that allowed the demon invasion were already there then. He counted 7. The system confirmed that this disease could be treated by affecting immunity, and that 7 was the maximum number of people he could work on with his parallel operation skill. Deciding first to give medicine to ease symptoms, he prepares to activate the ability, a healing skill that allows treating several at once. Meanwhile, outside, the blonde princess stubbornly refuses to leave. She insists that since they are in the royal capital, Salam cannot be left unattended and must truly stand guard. From inside, Salam's voice reaches his other companions, telling Hadija and Valeria that the treatment will take some time and they can stretch their legs if they get bored. As if he anticipated their worries, he ordered the steward to rotate the team of 22 attendants so that no one would become exhausted. He explained that Caddy must primarily guard him and Valeria must continue training. Valeria nodded in agreement, and Salam added that he would stay and also watch over him. When the treatment finally ended, the peasants began to stir and whisper that they already felt better. Embarrassed, someone asked who he was, and he replied that he was Salam Bergman, heir to the Duke's house, and that his servants had brought them porridge. The news of his noble origin stunned them and left them speechless. Their surprise instantly turns into boundless gratitude. They cannot believe that such a sunny boy helped them. When they eat, they exclaim how divine this porridge is and how it soothes their exhausted stomachs, and they are left speechless by this kindness, realizing that it was their despair that made them eat spoiled food in the first place. Only the young boys explain their situation. They are all from the same orphanage and tried to start a small business together. He admits it was difficult, but friends were nearby and it was worth it. They made a mistake by buying cheap meat, and that ruined them. They sincerely thanked Salam while he quietly observed their resilience. Their gratitude fills the room. A series of notifications floods his vision. The system confirms that he has cured the ailment of all 7 people and gives him 1,000 experience points for each. The sudden influx of 7,000 points instantly raises his level, and he holds his breath as a wave of power flows through him. He processes this huge gain in experience and realizes, if he gained it at this pace every day, he would become unstoppable, but his thoughts are interrupted by one of the boys pulling his cloak, rejoicing that everyone is okay and calling the young lord a good person. His attention shifted in an instant when he found himself in a noisy party hall. It had been a long time since he was surrounded by so many people, and he felt, from now on his life would become a world of politics and intrigue, a sharp contrast to those simple days when he could joke with Amanda. He recalled the pride of his future self as the heir of the Duke's family, but this title brought him only mockery and hatred, and now he understood that he must behave with restraint and caution, simply so that no one would mock him. Determined not to let that future repeat, he began to carry himself with the dignity of a true aristocrat, and this subtle change in manners did not go unnoticed. A group of young ladies gawked and whispered as he passed by. He was anxious from the sudden attention of classmates. Since the entrance ceremony, such looks had been cast at him that sharply differed from his memories. It seemed to him that former arrogance pushed people away, and the current gentleness, which came with another life, attracted them. His gaze fell on Lisa Lott, the daughter of Viscount Belt, and he remembered that in the future she never once looked at him with such admiration. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Crown Princess Rafaela. She appeared with only 2 companions. Valerie Meldars noticed the small retinue, but Salam corrected him. The princess simply found large crowds annoying and was not interested in factions, although she led the largest one in the academy and had many servants. He approached and formally greeted her, introducing himself as Salam Bergman, the firstborn of his house, saying that it was an honor for him to study at the academy alongside her. Princess Rafaela nodded coldly and replied that she also looked forward to their time together, but as she spoke, a cold memory surfaced in his mind. Even in the future, when he became a demon, he never managed to defeat her. His thoughts turned to her lineage. The current king had 2 daughters, Princess Rafaela and the younger Amelia, and from a young age Rafaela was distinguished as the heir to the crown because of her incredible magical power. When he looked at her now, she seemed fragile, as if she were only 15 because he remembered the future. She looked even younger than he remembered her. Yet despite her youth, it was said that in battle she could match the very first king. He remembered that she never liked empty conversations, so he greeted her briefly, and when he was about to leave, he looked at her face and saw only an empty, unreadable expression. He barely had time to step away when another young woman approached the princess, Lady Gelsamana Durrani, whose family the ducal house had asked to be a bridge to the princess. Gelsamana cheerfully praised her grace and started talking about a popular novel, saying that one of its characters strangely resembled Lord Bergman. He watched them and with relief understood that his introduction was over. Now all that remained was to wait for others to greet her, because the thought of approaching the princess closer still seemed incredible, and he recalled that Gelsamana had always been kind to him, even in the future. He could not help but think about the heir princess. Although her strength was impressive, she was always quiet and indifferent to those around her, and when it came to general abilities, even political savvy, he believed that the daughter of a marquis could be better. As if summoned by his thoughts, a young woman with long dark hair approached him. She gracefully bowed, introduced herself as Nadia Leuver, the eldest daughter of Marquis Leuver, and solemnly greeted Prince Selim Bergman. He recognized her instantly, the very one rumored to be even more skilled than the princess. He returned the greeting and said he looked forward to spending the next 3 years with her at the academy. Nadia agreed, noting that House Leuver had sent 24 students from their lands, even more than his own house, but Salim's thoughts drifted to a future only he remembered, where when the capital was captured by demons, House Leuver resisted to the end and saved many people, because then her command skills were unmatched and made her a key figure in the coming war. Her voice pulled him out of his thoughts and back to the present moment. She said that rumors about him had already reached her tent. She knew about his work creating magical devices for poor peasants, and recently, how his healing magic saved the sick. Placing her hand on her heart, she looked at him with sincere admiration and declared his deeds truly worthy of admiration, confessing that she dreamed of someday being like him. Her knowledge stunned him for a moment. He had only recently mastered healing magic and trained secretly, yet she already knew, and he realized this was a small display of power from the impressive spy network of a notable family. Nearby, Gilbert watched their interaction with Scalm, muttering how much Salam annoyed him. His thoughts were interrupted by a call. A burly boy with a short haircut called him by name and introduced himself as Mark, the 3rd son of the notable Sarmiento family. Salam immediately recognized him. In a previous life, Mark was one of the few at the academy he truly got along with, and he smiled, thinking these next 3 years should be used to the fullest. But suddenly a sternness froze on Mark's face. He leaned closer, asked if they could ever be friends again, then said he wanted Selin to better understand the church. These words confused her. Mark turned away and coldly said to come talk only after repentance. Salam finally realized Mark's uncle was the Archbishop of the capital, the highest church authority in the kingdom, and the lands of Sarmiento bordered the Holy Kingdom. So for a family with such deep ties to the church, someone like him, who heals with magic without church affiliation, was unacceptable and friendship was out of the question. Meanwhile, the companions reacted to the end of the formal greetings. Gilbert Benson grumbled that those two famous families were a complete hassle, and Valerie Meldars, as always serious, declared that they must unite to prove the superiority of their duke's family, and Salam just observed their passionate zeal. He stood aside and thought about the true face of this reception for freshmen. Although the aristocrats appeared refined, in essence they were warriors defending their lands by force, so it seemed he would have to tame their hot tempers. Then he turned to his group and ordered them to go and talk to anyone who caught their attention, regardless of territory or status. The gaze were gliding across the hall. He knew the hero from the common folk was somewhere here, but an unwritten rule separated the noble from the common, and although he dreamed of greeting that hero, he realized that openly approaching now would only attract unnecessary attention. The thought triggered a sharp memory, the face of that very hero, who in another life defeated him when he had already become a demon. Attention shifted to the second key figure in the room, Nadia Luover, the Marquis's daughter. They understood how crucially important the hero's combat power and Nadia's ability to command both would be needed to withstand the approaching demonic threat. Deciding to wait for a suitable moment to approach them, he heard a voice. It was Lisa Lotbelt. She remarked with surprise how much he had changed since their last meeting. Embarrassed, Salam asked when that was. She replied, last summer, and he thought to himself that for him so much had happened since last autumn, from the moment he began living his life anew. At least she admitted she had heard about his recent deeds in the capital. Perhaps that explains his change in views. Salam offered a carefully thought-out version. Those who use healing magic often become softer, and pretending to be such a person would hide his rapid level growth. She seemed to believe it. I used it a year ago. He looked like a terrible villain from a bad show. Suddenly she completely changed, clasped her hands, her face flushed. She spoke admiringly about how gentle and refined he was now, like a hero of a romantic novel. Imagination ran wild, and this completely embarrassed Salam. He froze in surprise. Was Lisa always like that? The woman from his memories of the future was cold, restrained, and mature, his true ideal. And she, noticing this side of him, sincerely rejoiced and at the same time warned that now other noble ladies would be vying for him, and he made a stunning conclusion. Until now, he had completely misjudged people. Suddenly, he found himself the center of attention of a group of female students. Princess Raffala's eyes sparkled when she called him dreamy, and others shyly asked if they could approach him. One girl excitedly pointed at him, urging her friends to look. Surrounded by an unexpected crowd, he felt everything inside him whirl. This level of attention was completely new to him, nothing like it had happened in his previous life. He realized that school days would be much more chaotic than he had ever imagined. Behind his back, Lisa winked and jokingly remarked on his popularity already on the first day. She advised him not to rush but coquettishly warned, don't let other girls snatch him away. On the training grounds of the academy, the first semester class begins, and for Salam Bergman, this is his second attempt at school life, so he is determined to stay focused. His main goal is to raise his level to 50, because the system requires it to awaken his sacred attribute and prevent him from turning into a demon again, while the instructor addresses the gathered students and asks them to put on armor for the general fencing lesson. He understands that the lesson proceeds exactly the same as before he turned back time. Nearby, a student explains the rules of the upcoming duel snow magic to enhance the body, only sword skills, and the armor is enchanted, he adds, so there is no need to worry about injuries. After this, the instructor asks who wants to be first in the duel. Mark from the noble Sarmiento family raises his hand without hesitation and announces that it is a great honor for him to fight Lord Bergman. He sized up Mark, sensing clear hostility from him. Despite this, he agreed to the fight because he understood that this was exactly what he needed. His fencing teacher, Nadia, said he relied too much on magic, and this was a great opportunity to finally train properly with a sword. The students take their positions, stand opposite each other, a draw. At the instructor's signal, the duel begins. Blades clash. Mark smirks and says that at least Salam now knows how to parry strikes, and Salam surveys the skirmish and concludes that without magic their strength is almost equal. Conan mercilessly presses the attack. Mark Taunton asks how he will withstand the next blow. Salam struggles under the force of the strike and realizes that every hit feels heavy due to his slender build and inability to use body-enhancing magic. He is clearly inferior in physical strength. The barrage of attacks proved too strong to withstand. The instructor stops the duel and declares Mark the winner. Salam is forced to drop to one knee, defeated, while Mark stands over him in triumph. A wide, malicious smile spreads across Mark's face, quietly celebrates his victory, and savors the feeling of having defeated some guy's older son. The students whisper among themselves, while Salam, still on the floor, looks up confusedly, does not understand what Mark is boasting about. It was only a training fight where magic was forbidden. But he sat on the bench and listened as his friend Gilbert Benson passionately declared, if someone challenges again, Gilbert should be allowed to fight instead of him, because, as Gilbert claimed, for noble victory or defeat is a matter of honor, so one can safely send a skilled subordinate. His comrade blazed with determination, wanting to show the power of the people of Hosburg for Selim's victory, but Valerie Maldor saw everything differently and said that although Gilbert was indeed skilled, he believed you learn more when you face strong opponents even in defeat, and Gilbert's fervor seemed to fade when he realized his plan would not succeed. He understood, his friends praised him so much that he felt he had to live up to their expectations. He recalled the previous future, where all expectations turned into incredible pressure, and a memory surfaced of his first duel with the hero, a defeat that nearly broke his mind. His thoughts returned to the present. In this branch of time, the academy belonged to the nobility, and a commoner boy, like our hero, was almost invisible. Suddenly he realized he had not seen this commoner hero at all. It dawned on him it was his fault. In that other timeline, the hero attracted attention only because he defeated Salam, but this time Mark met Salam. He decided, as if quietly apologizing to his friends, that he would have to suffer a humiliating defeat again, and unaware of this storm in his soul, Gilbert clenched his fist and promised himself he would not lose next time. 3 days later, the fencing instructor announced that there would be sparring today and called on those who wanted to fight first to step forward. Mark Sarmiento immediately stepped forward, grinning at Salam and proposing a rematch. Gilbert was already about to intervene, but Salam stopped him, deciding that fighting the same opponent again would be boring. His true intention was quite different. He had to challenge the hero, make him known and stronger, so they would not get into trouble when the demon finally attacked. Losing twice in a row would disappoint his comrades, but that was a price he was willing to pay, and as he prepared, a clear voice cut through the air, asking the bird prince for a sparring match. It was Princess Rafaela. She stood ready with a sword, her gaze unwavering and serious. While the princess waited for his response, Salam struggled inside with the choice. He knew he could not refuse the royal invitation. Giving the place to Gilbert was also not an option. The princess was known for incredible strength, and even defeat by her seemed less humiliating than defeat by Mark. So he brushed off Gilbert's fears, stepped forward, and agreed to the duel. Now he stood opposite her on the dueling field. Her figure seemed light and delicate, what would usually be considered a weakness in sword fighting, but he knew well, in reality, everything was quite different. The duel began instantly. She lunged with blinding speed. The pressure of her attack was so immense that it seemed as if several blades were cutting him at once. He recognized this merciless power, the same one with which she struck him in the previous timeline when he had already become a demon. He managed to parry the fierce strike. Their blades clashed, sparks flying like a downpour. For a moment they froze face to face. The force of the blow rolled through their arms. Staring into her unwavering eyes, he heard only one command: surrender. And at that moment everything became clear. Her stunning skill made any appearance irrelevant. She was, without a doubt, the most hardened warrior he had ever met. A week later on the training field, the new instructor of offensive magic introduced himself as Stein and showed special magical armor from the Institute of Magical Research that could neutralize enemy spells. While the students were chatting, Selin, to Gilbert's great surprise, confirmed that Stein was his former private mentor, after which Stein announced that the rare armor would be distributed, but those below the rank of Baron would only observe, and immediately called Selin to challenge him to show his abilities. The former mentor approached Salim and noted that back in his district, he often slacked off during magic lessons. He expressed hope that at the Royal Academy Salim would take his studies more seriously so as not to fall behind, and Salim politely greeted his old teacher, noting that they had not seen each other for a long time. He mentally noted Stein's passive-aggressive tone and recalled, as soon as his father gave consent, Stein's lessons were immediately shortened earlier. In his old vision of the future, he mistakenly perceived those overly long trainings as dedication, believing it was the only path to improvement, but now he saw everything quite differently. His opponent for the day, the second son of the Count, chosen by lot, turned out to be a young woman. After making sure everyone was wearing armor, she announced the start of the duels. Taking a stance, she threw a fireball at Selin. The spell dissipated and safely shattered against the shining ruins of his armor. He stood motionless, unfazed by the spectacle. The opponent looked admiringly at the power of the armor, and Gilbert remarked aloud that the other students were just standing and watching. They watched as the Marquis's daughter, Nadia Louviver, unleashed a storm of magical attacks on Princess Rafaela and laughed with delight, boasting of her power. The princess, however, stood completely unmoved. The attack had no effect on her at all. Nadia giggled and said that this was to be expected from the princess. From Salim's side, he noticed that since this was training among skilled fighters, there was no point in relying on protective gear if you know how to defend yourself. This place awakened a painful memory in him. In the previous timeline, using this very magical apparatus, he caused a terrible disaster. The memory sharpened. After losing a duel to the hero, he became obsessed and did not want to be humiliated for losing to a commoner, so to prove his superiority in magic, he unleashed a powerful ice ball that caused panic and sent people running for medical help. He believed Stein's words that he could go all out, and because of this, despite the true skill of the opponent, he cast the spell with full force and left the boy with a severe injury forever. To make matters worse, he panicked and cruelly accused the wounded boy of weakness. This angered the hero, who challenged him and beat him unconscious, a truly traumatic memory. But after shaking it off, Salam decided this time to act slowly and thoughtfully, carefully assessing the opponent, and began forming a controlled ice ball. His opponent, a nervous student, was impressed by the protective magic armor Stein given to her. She knew it could repel magic of that level, but also understood that against serious blows from high-ranking nobles with strong mana, it would not hold. He silently observed the reaction with a wry smile, of course keeping his distance, but decided to watch closely just in case. Smiling, he approached the others and called someone to train with something truly powerful. Mark Sarmiento immediately responded to his challenge. He began gathering enormous energy, and with a mad laugh declared he would unleash the Earth Cannon, thinking that maybe this time he would make Salam look like the villain. When the spell began to form, Salam instantly rushed forward and stood in front of Gilbert, shielding him. A magical barrier spun around him, and he sternly ordered Mark to stay away, reminding him that the protective armor was not invincible. He sharply demanded to know what she was thinking, saying that a direct hit from her spell could cause a serious accident, but the student waved her hand and told Prince Salam not to interfere. She said she was about to show Mark a powerful spell, and that the magical equipment he wore could not fully block attacks from high-ranking nobles. Stein also ordered him to step back, waving off the armor as a cheap trinket that would fit Salam's size, and explained that the structure was very fragile and that he still owed Mark a rematch after their sword fight. So to settle it once and for all, he declared he would fight the student himself and break the armor to prove his point, and amused by his interference, she accepted the challenge. She confidently gave him the first blow. Without hesitation, he released the ice ball. The spell hit his breastplate and shook him. He mentally understood that the power was just enough. The ball barely touched vital points because his goal was simple: to show how fragile this armor really was. The armor cracked from the blow. The student froze in shock. Stein rushed forward and pointed out that it could no longer protect against Mark's magic. Salam looked at the broken pieces on the floor, filled with regret, and silently cursed himself for ever believing the one who made such unreliable equipment. Her opponent laughed mockingly, said that in another timeline she was captured during the rebellion that destroyed the kingdom, added that a mere wound did not prove danger to him, and prepared to cast another cannon. Salam understood with grim certainty that she had no intention of stopping. He quickly apologized to Mark and asked him to endure what was about to come. As soon as his opponent noticed he was casting a barrier spell, Salam instantly launched a counterattack, an ice blade that cut her arm, and she screamed in pain. She clenched her bleeding arm and waved it off. It was just a minor scratch that anyone from the Marquis family could heal. But Salam froze at a message that appeared only to him. His experience points decreased by 1,000 for intentionally injuring someone. Cold realization passed through his body. Causing pain and humiliating people was exactly the reason everyone hated him in his past life, and he is horrified that he is making the same mistakes again, while Gilbert Benson is wildly happy, praising him for beating the girl Sarmiento and declaring that she deserved it, and the other students echo the same opinion. He watches his assistants and notices the hot blood in their veins, understanding that for them, especially for nobles whose honor is tied to victory, his action is a justified retaliation for the insult Mark inflicted on him during the fencing lesson, and they believe the debt has been paid. The damaged armor finally completely crumbles, and Stein freezes in disbelief, cannot comprehend how this seemingly strong armor failed. Selim, offended, explains that the magical power of the higher nobles is a completely different level, and offended that Stein considered this armor real protection, offers the broken fragments to the other students, as if advising them to borrow them so they do not overestimate magical things by experience and avoid accidents. Stein is left speechless, forced to admit that he underestimated the true power of the nobles. He stood over the fallen opponent, whom another student was already helping. He expected this to anger the hero and for him to challenge him, but the training hall was silent. Then he realized. Unlike the past where he simply attacked someone, this was a real duel between nobles with their history, and the hero, a commoner, had no reason to intervene. While he was thinking this, his friend Gilbert cheerfully said that it was good that no one was seriously hurt. Instructor Stein, who was working part-time, simply agreed. That's how it was supposed to happen. Their words did not reach him because a new message appeared before his eyes. He received 100 experience points for acting for others despite his own loss. A moment of stunned silence turned into Regenerative. The system praises him now. Then why a moment ago did it take away 1,000 points? His sudden, irritated shout caught his comrades looking at him with incomprehension. They did not know about these conflicting game forces. At the academy, Gilbert Benson enthusiastically talks about their new life in the capital, says that since the Sarmiento faction was defeated, Salam Bergman's fame as a mage has simply shown. Valerie Meldarsk adds that his abilities have finally begun to be truly appreciated, and Salam himself smiles, admitting that at first he was nervous and did not know how it would all end, but now it seems his life at the academy is going smoothly. His face darkened. In his soul, he rejects this thought. Everything is not going smoothly at all. 3 weeks have passed since enrollment, and no one has paid any attention to the hero. In the previous future, the hero instantly became the center of attention at the academy. The reason for that fame was his victory over him, but this time that event never happened. Slowly swallowing the drink, he realizes the terrible consequences. If the hero is not noticed, it will be a disaster. This academy only provides basic knowledge unless you are from a faction, and advanced magic, passed down from generation to generation by noble families, is not openly taught here. Connections are needed to learn anything about true death. Keep looking into the future. The hero must quickly gain recognition, join a respected faction, and find himself in a place that suits his talents. He needs to become stronger to withstand the demons that sooner or later will threaten everyone. He hesitates, not knowing what to do next, whether to approach the hero directly or to be patient because, if the hero is ignored by the people of the capital, any direct intervention by him, as a member of the Queen's faction, will be perceived as political interference. He is considering his options when Gilbert and Valerie approach. Gilbert asks what happened, but Selena can barely hear. His attention is fixed on the hero in the distance, and suddenly he realizes. That pained expression on the hero's face is not from hatred, as he had assumed. He was mistaken. Their conversation is suddenly interrupted by a commotion from the yard. Clear sounds of a fight echo in the air. Someone shouts in shock, calling what is happening a mob lynching. Salam sees the hero surrounded and boldly dodging every blow, thinks this is a chance to intervene and help, but loses resolve when he sees the attackers start chanting, preparing for a simultaneous magical attack, and realizing things have gone too far, he shouts with them to stop. But before anyone can act, the hero releases his power. With one sharp gesture, he summons a mighty gust of wind magic that sweeps the attackers away in one decisive burst, and Salam and the rest of the onlookers are frozen in stunned silence at this unexpected force. He turns and walks away, the display of his power stunning everyone around. Salam Bergman shouts, calling him a hero and lamenting that he is leaving just now when they have finally met, while other students, including Princess Rafgella and Lady Louver, look on with disbelief. As he leaves, the hero freezes at the sudden change in Salam's behavior. The young nobleman laughs joyfully and shouts how incredible the performance was, and the hero cannot understand why Salam is the only one not trying to defeat him. Gilbert and Valerie catch up to him, begging him to wait. Gilbert grumbles that he has never seen such a smile on Salam before, and Salam, with a wide grin, says his research proves heroes should be cheerful, so he wants to spar with this hero and boldly promises if he wins, he will make the hero smile. He simply brushed off the offer without a second thought and declared he was not interested. Gilbert exploded with anger at the disrespect to Salam, the heir of the Duchy of Bergman. Salam just laughed, as if pleased by the hero's direct and disdainful refusal. His gaze sharpens as he addresses the young nobleman by his full name and directly asks if Salam was not treated for food poisoning. Just 3 weeks ago, the question wipes the smile from Salam's face, and he freezes, stunned, not understanding where the hero got this information. The hero recalls whispers among the other students. They spoke of the Duke's son as if he had come straight out of some popular story. He finally reveals the connection. Those who treated Salam turned out to be his childhood friends. He looks at the young nobleman questioningly, seeking confirmation. The realization struck Salam. He now understands he owes the hero, and says he will agree to a duel if that is desired. To himself, he notes that the seeker's actions turned out to be useful. Seeing how the situation unfolds, Princess Rafla intervened, placing her hand on the hero's shoulder. She indicated that one corner of the training ground was reserved for the private use of the Bergman family and ordered their group to clear the space for the duel. He readily agreed. As they prepare to face each other, the young nobleman solemnly introduces himself again. Salam Bergman. The hero responds by giving his name, Leo, an orphan without a surname. He asks the hero to call him Salam and announces that their duel begins. No rules, magic, and swords are allowed. He invites Leo to attack as he wishes, acknowledging him as the future hero who will overthrow the Demon King, and Leo simply agrees. The duel ignites with movement. Leo rushes forward. His blade meets Salam's blade in a shower of sparks. A magical circle appears around him, and when their eyes lock, Salam feels a strange tremor. He is looking at the person who one day defeated his future self. Salam easily parried the strike and raised his hand to stop the exchange. The spectators, even Gilbert, whispered admiringly at his calmness, noting that he allows his opponent to attack freely, while Salam mentally decided he had more than enough room to maneuver. Their blades are still locked. He admits that the hero is truly powerful. He explains that neither of them will inflict a fatal wound on the other. Mutual trust in high skill allows them to fight with such confidence. Leo considers the situation. Before him is the 15-year-old version of the person who will become the Demon King. Recalling his victory at 17, he knows experience is on his side, but Salam thinks otherwise and releases an ice ball. He barely dodges the icy projectile. A thin line of blood appears on his arm. Salam smiles mockingly and says not to hold back. He knows Leo's true strength well and urges him without hesitation to use mid-level wind magic. In response, Leo raises his hand, and a powerful whirlwind explodes. Salam's face lights up with genuine admiration. He encourages Leo to cast even more spectacular magic and techniques so everyone can see his talent. The spectators watch, stunned. Performance leaves the audience in thrilled awe. Gilbert exclaims in amazement at Leo's incredible power. Valerie doubts his origin after all. He is a commoner from the royal orphanage, and without a known faction. Nadia laughs, seeing in him the future main military force of the Duke's house, and Princess Rafla quietly notes how interesting her first opponent is. Gilbert approached Leo and apologized on behalf of Salam, explaining that when the nobility or king learn about a strong person, they immediately try to recruit them, and the Duke's house is no exception. They also seek to bind such talent with generous conditions. Leo resolutely replies that he will never leave the land where he was born and raised, and Salam intervenes, asking friends not to insist, and warns, forced recruitment is a bad idea because making an enemy out of a hero can be costly. He listened as Leo explained that in his current state, he was not yet a threat. The attack was strong but simple and could be withstood, but if he combined the just-used wind magic with fire magic, everything could change. Intrigued by this possibility, Salam's eyes lit up. He reached out to Leo, challenging him to try it right here and now, and declared that he could become even stronger. Accepting the challenge, Leo tightened his facial features in concentration. Around his outstretched hand swirled a vortex of powerful energy. The air crackled with the force being born. Gilbert watched, unbelieving Leo managed to replicate the magic after seeing it only once. Salam felt anxiety mentally. Seeing this talent with his own eyes unsettled him, but at the same time ignited a desire to have such power on his side, and this changed his attitude. He turned to Leo and said that this was not the end. Salam asked if Leo knew that the hero had an extraordinary ability to copy others' magic, and warned that this very power would bring him great problems in the future. Leo only responded with a questioning look. Other nobles intervened, and Gilbert enthusiastically suggested that if the Duchy of Bergman signed a contract with Leo, he could use the magic of their lineage and become a great advantage. Leo found all this boring, but Gilbert insisted, explaining that among nobles it is considered rude not to offer such wonderful magic. Seizing the initiative, Salam ordered Valeria to write a letter to the Cole family on behalf of Leo, and Valeria immediately confirmed this. Salam explained to Leo that even for a person without a title, sending a letter is a simple formality and much better than receiving an official, inevitable summons. He continued, warning Leo, life at the academy is governed by unwritten rules that he does not know. He recalled troubles in the courtyard and reminded that the first academy of magic is the domain of the nobility, so as a commoner Leo would inevitably face disrespect and trials, especially because the royal family should not be trusted. So Salam advised, if Leo intends to enroll, he must have at least one official document in his name, and promised that if Leo ever wants to use magic, Salam and his comrades will come to him to confirm it. Behind him stood friends, and Salam solemnly asked Leo to become his follower, urging him to rely on their support under the expectant gazes of noble students. Leo lowered his eyes for a moment, then met Salam's gaze with a faint smile and quietly, with a simple thank you, agreed. When Leo agrees to the new arrangement, Salam looks at him. A notification appears in his field of vision. He helped a lonely classmate gain 200 experience points, totaling 220 out of 3,600 to level 35. Satisfied, Salam considers this a good step toward deepening their friendship, reflects on Leo's loneliness, and whether the Duke's system made him a recluse. This thought strikes at the heart. Selene recalls how his own pride once painfully clashed with the burden of being a hero from the commoners, but he understands that Leo is not so simple in an academy ruled by nobles. He had to undergo incredible trials, and Selene feels he has seen a glimpse of heroic potential and gladly accepts him as a new comrade in the circle. In the courtyard of the academy, Gilbert Benson says that Leo recently arrived at the Bergman ducal house and that he and young Master Salam are both 15. Valerie Meldar interrupts. It is unreasonable to appoint a peer to Salam at such an age, but Gilbert replies that Leo is a simple hero from the capital, and his appearance is a chance for the academy to shine. While the attendants argue, Salam silently decides to watch the newcomer from afar without interfering. Meanwhile, they say Leo will definitely become a great help to the country in the future, and that he must strive to become stronger, wherever he is sent. He listens with a determined expression, because he understands that the hero's strength is necessary to fight the demons that will one day threaten everyone. The news about his methods of forced recruitment troubled Salam. He observed the rush to grab talented people, and was horrified what a disaster it would be if, after coercion, they failed to properly train them for service. Feeling the silent order of his master, Valerie clenches his hands with fervent understanding and says he will guard Leo as commanded, without interfering too much, and will immediately take care of the carriage. Walking down the stone corridor, Salam told his companions that he would continue studying pharmacology outside the university, and that Elder Amanda from his region had given him a letter of introduction to the apothecary in the capital. Valerie says he does not understand pharmacology. Gilbert gladly offers to accompany Salam, but Salam explains that he has already entrusted Valerie to take care of the carriage and that they must travel separately. Gilbert protests, calling himself his right hand, and Valerie calmly insists that he will accompany the master during this trip outside the campus. His insistence on being present triggers a memory in Salam. He recalls how he once walked with a large retinue and felt as if each of them looked at him with suspicion or contempt. Gilbert says the heir needs an escort, but earlier Salam was surrounded too tightly. Now, feeling the burden of constant attention, he often tries to walk alone, and Valerie wonders how strange it is when the escort is simultaneously as if not an escort. Gilbert says that for other cases it is worth taking more people. Valerie agrees, and Salam hesitates. He feels that coming to the home of ordinary people with a large retinue would be an inconvenience and cause them trouble. Salam stands lost in thought. Gilbert notices their transport and loudly calls to have it stopped. Valerie points toward the parking lot and suggests they go there. In the great First Academy of Magic, Bergman stands by the waiting carriage. He watches his escort, Gilbert and Valerie, who are talking with a young aristocrat, and thinks that in this world students are expected to be able to protect themselves alone, although the difference in status and abilities is part of life. He believes it is wrong to impose one's will on another person unilaterally, and this very thought is connected to the reason why his country stands on the brink of collapse. Suddenly, his servant pushed the young woman into the carriage, and the coachman hurriedly urged them on. Seeing this, Salam rushed to them, sharply demanding to know what they were doing. With icy certainty, he understood they were trying to escape. When they panic and try to flee, he calmly raises his hand from the ground, erupts a colossal wall of sharp ice, instantly enveloping the carriage and horses and completely stopping them. Salam slightly smiles, says he appreciates their concern for his safety, but assures them, as long as there is any reserve of magic in the academy, they will not die, and adds that their opponent's system has a fatal flaw. When the ice shattered into pieces, stunned Valerie shouted Salam's name, not understanding what had happened, and Salam, recovering, immediately ordered someone to call the academy staff to deal with the offenders. Ignoring his escort, Salam fully focuses on the young woman, gently takes her hand, his face softens, and he asks if she is all right. She looks up at him, her eyes wide open and wet with tears. She is clearly trembling and tightly squeezing his hand, trying to compose herself. He recognizes her Laura Panetti and realizes she cannot walk. Nearby, Gilbert blushed with shame, understanding that his plan to send Valerie to the service room had failed. Gilbert rushed to them, flustredly explaining that he was only worried about Salam's safety, and Salam asks him to calm down and says that Laura is too upset to talk right now. While he hesitates about what to do next, a man in a top hat rushes to them, calling his young lady. He anxiously asks if she is unharmed, then addresses Salam, apologizes for the interference, and says he is from her staff. The man explained, that woman is Lady Laura, daughter of Viscal Ponti, and he was looking for her because she did not appear at the boarding point. She got out of the carriage to look around. Finally, he also noticed how huge the academy's parking lot was. While Salim Bergman watched coldly, Gilbert insisted that he could not just leave Laura Panetti and swore to take her home himself. Salim pronounced the name of his subordinate in a way that made arguing pointless. Everyone knows. Only high nobles can park carriages at the academy entrance. Quasi-barons do not have this privilege, and Laura was driven into a deserted alley by people with ill intentions. In response to the situation, the head of the Panetti family ordered his subordinates to contact the apothecary Valeria and Lady Laura's attendant, explaining that she was isolated and abused at the academy, and sadly said, "In their world, the weak are left without allies and turned into prey for the strong." Salam internally analyzes the motives. He admits that he intervened only because he saw Gilbert, usually a troublemaker, strangely worried about Laura. Noticing the feelings of his subordinates, he followed, and that led him to the scene, and later he recalls that Gilbert became an excellent subordinate whose cheerful character always boosted his reputation. His thoughts were interrupted by Valeria's approach. She reported about the Panetti family, and he explained that it was a merchant house that bought an almost empty title from the king and had many shops. Salam knew nothing about them because he never dealt with this family, so Valeria concluded that there must be some other circumstances. Reflecting on this, Selin considers it unthinkable that a person without a true lineage would send a daughter to the academy for real nobility. Exposing a defenseless girl to a crowd of arrogant and cruel nobles was a real foolishness. Laura's mother cries, saying that she should never have allowed her daughter to enter that academy, and her husband tries to comfort her, explaining that he asked the ladies-in-waiting of the Durrani Palace to look after Laura to avoid such a result. However, this request was ignored. At the academy, Lady Gelsimana Duranty did not even acknowledge Laura, demonstratively looking away, and because of this, Laura remained completely isolated. Salam recalled his conversation with Lady Helsamina. On the day of the entrance ceremony, she asked him to mediate with the princess, saying that the Bergman family also serves the palace, and even then, knowing in advance, he realized that she was two-faced. His expression darkens from this realization. He thinks about the hero Leo and decides that the people around the Princess heir Rafdella are a complete mess. She reflects on the fate of the heir to the throne. She was supposed to be raised in the best conditions, but the current king deliberately cultivates only strength in her, believing that by the age of 18 she will have no choice left. She will become a puppet for battle, a mere tool of her title. In the Panetti house, Laura's mother pleadingly asks her husband. Her voice tightening with anxiety, she insists that Laura be taken out of the academy because continuing her studies is too dangerous, and it would be better for her to leave as soon as possible. Her husband remains grim, explaining that the right to enter in the same year as the crown princess is a privilege that everyone desires, and he fears that if they refuse such a valuable position, other noble families will inevitably turn against them with hostility. Somewhere on the side, Selin Bergman eavesdrops on what is unfolding, and his face hardens. He understands this is a troublesome matter, so he decides to first talk to his faction. He gathers his comrades and orders them to watch Laura Panetti. Gilbert, as always passionate, asks how he can help, but Selim brushes off his enthusiasm and says that although it is sincere, Gilbert is unlikely to be useful in this matter, and a memory surfaces in Selim's mind of how this problem had already unfolded once before. The decision to protect Laura was not made lightly. It was based on his knowledge of the future. He knew, if he publicly declared himself her shield, the boys who mocked her would be forced to stop. He was the only one who could stop the insidious bullying she was experiencing. Salam's main goal is to support Leo from the shadows. For this, he needs to gather talented people, and for the nobility, this is quite natural. But Laura does not stand out with talents, just a beautiful low-ranking student, so why is he ready to take such steps for her? In his memory, he sees how others perceived his actions. Gelsimina Durrani gossiped with another student, saying she came to the academy looking for a partner with high status. Laura, unable to match Salam in either status or skills, could never become his fiancée, and his barely sincere sympathy turned into completely unexpected consequences. As a result, a storm of shameful rumors arose. Unable to withstand the slanders, Laura was forced to leave the academy. The Panetti family, having angered the nobility, found themselves on the brink of ruin. Returning to the present, Salam recalls how Gilbert later searched for Laura's fate and learned that she and her family had moved to a village, and this matter separated them and spoiled his relationship with the subordinate who was once so cheerful and frank. Now he finally understands how clumsy his previous response was, and to solve this problem properly he needs a collaborator, so he approaches Lisa Lotbelt, explains that his faction is mostly male, and asks her, as another second-year student, for advice on how to deal with the carefully organized bullying of Laura. With a gesture he points to Gilbert Benson. He loudly declares that Laura belongs only to him and warns everyone not to touch her. Lisa Lot turns back to Salam and sharply asks if this public display is his way of solving the problem. He calmly dismisses this idea as a clumsy tactic, explaining that he has no personal interest in getting involved with Laura, since any careless word from him would only ruin her life and intensify the bullying, and adds that as a candidate for St. Hood connected to the Seeker system, he is definitely not her lover. Dreamily sighing, she did not perceive his serious explanation at all. Her imagination flew to the plot of a popular novel. A handsome duke rescues a lady in distress, love that disregards status, and she allowed wonders if she accidentally stumbled upon such a romantic story. The romantic fantasy played stronger. She hid her embarrassed face in her palms and exclaimed that she was almost fainting and could not bear to hear such words from the duke. He observes her reaction, mentally noting that the reserved woman he knows from the future does not behave like this at all. Realizing that for Laura this is a serious problem that could turn her life upside down, he decides that he must make Lisa Lot focus on a real solution. To pull her out of her dreams, he firmly grabbed her by the shoulders and, looking intently, forced her to seriously look at what was happening. He leans closer, acknowledges the awkward closeness, but insists that she listen to him, apologizes for pressing her, and explains that he needs her help to develop the right strategy, because without her, he cannot move forward. She stammers, saying his name. A blush spreads across her face. As he pulls away, he suddenly realizes how close he was. Gathering herself, Lisa asks for more details and says that if the Duke does not want to act alone, he has the perfect female boss who will handle it. Questions concern this boss. Lisa repeatedly clarifies that she means a woman of the same rank with an authoritative presence, Lady Nadia Louiver. Thoughts themselves carried him to Nadia Louiver, he was sure. If he directly asked her for help, she would not refuse, because he remembered her from the future as a great heroine who tirelessly fought demons, and thanks to this knowledge saved many people, so he definitely felt that she would agree to help Laura. He explained to Lisa for a long time that his past defeats happened because he took on matters he could not handle alone. Now he finally understood that there was another way. It was better to ask for help from those who could succeed where he might fail, and returning to his assistant, he directly ordered Valerie arrange a meeting with Lady Louiver tomorrow after classes, to which Valerie bowed his head and agreed. As soon as the order was given, thoughts swirled in Lisa Lot's head. Lady Louiver seemed frightening to her, and she did not know how to get along with her at all. Despite doubts, everything was decided. A meeting with an important person appeared in the schedule. Seeing her thoughtful expression, Salim simply said the essence. Well, this is about saving someone. When night fell over the estate, he could only hope that his plan would work. He was worried whether they would be received badly. The result of his meeting with the young lady remained in question. In the special lounge of the academy, Selin Bergman and his companions Gilbert, Valerie, Lisa Lott, and Laura Panetti sit at an official meeting, and opposite them, at a low table, a group of female students serves them tea. The woman leading the opposite group, Nadia Louiver, introduces herself, and her associates Pamela Suddy and Juliette Janer. With a confident smile, she looks directly at Salim and asks him to say why they have come. Suddenly tension gripped him. He felt inside that the Louiver faction mostly consisted of women, and this made the luxurious room anxious and nervous. Sensing his hesitation, Lisa Lott intervened and confirmed that she had already allowed herself to assess the overall situation for them. She detailed her findings, explaining that Laura Panetti was now isolated in the academy and found herself in a dangerous position. Lisa Lott added that if she directly helped Laura, she would surely face disgraceful dismissal. He uttered a few words, asking if that was exactly why they wanted to borrow the power of Louiver faction. Nadia smiled warmly and noted that he was really as kind as people, said, a remark that seemed to catch him by surprise. Her smile was disarming but at the same time troubled him. He noticed that every time they met, she praised him. According to the Pathfinder system, he knew he was not a good person, but she seemed determined to find at least a drop of good in him and uplift him. He reviewed their meetings and suddenly realized her praise was a polite way to keep him at a distance. This discovery settled in his mind. She was a creepy woman. When she spoke, her penetrating gaze met his and confirmed what he had not said. She directly stated that their case, as she suspected, concerned Laura Panetti. Even before the conversation could continue, the salon doors burst open with a loud cracked student with glasses and braided pigtails ran in, shouting that she had news for everyone about the previous night. She burst into the room, out of breath, and informed Gillette that Selene Bergman had just saved Laura Panetti. One student explained that she had driven away several boys who were bothering her. Even using magic, this news instantly spread a wave of excitement through the group. One girl noted that Selene always helps beautiful girls. Another added that her beauty is accompanied by a good character. And Lisa Lott quietly remarked that all this sounded too much like a popular legend. After this explosion of emotions, Nadia Louiver fell silent, her face unreadable. Lisa Lott began apologizing for interrupting, but Nadia quietly whispered that she understood, and as Lisa Lott said, looked at us thoughtfully with a faint, as if knowing everything, smile on her lips. Her thoughts involuntarily drift to the popular novel spreading through the capitale about the love of an aristocrat and a simple girl. She recalls that this aristocrat, strangely resembling Salam, became so popular that ordinary people now whisper about him. She continues her inner monologue knowing she should not give in, but cannot shake the feeling that resembles the villainess from the story, the rival for the protagonist's attention, and this feeling has intensified now that Salam has asked her for a favor. She intently looks into the cup of tea and dismisses the thought is not at all like that heroine. In the future, she is destined to inherit the family title, so there is no reason for her ever to be engaged to someone like that nobleman. Her thoughts turn to Leo, the commoner hero. She sees real abilities in him, but his habit of imposing his insufficient strength on her irritates. She sharply reproaches him inwardly, calling him rather a sly fox. This internal assessment seems aimed at Salam, who looks at her with a tense expression, and Nadia says she knows he once saved many ordinary people under the name Louiver, but admits that with kind people like him, she finds it hard to get along. He replies coldly that he intervened in that situation with the girl only because it happened right before his eyes. Nadia smiles slightly and cuts in that Leo has not yet been successfully recruited, so if Salam is interested, he can try to talk to him. In Salam's mind, a vision of the future flashed a memory from another life. He sees Leo wildly devoted, standing shoulder to shoulder with Nadia defending people, and knows that if Nadia properly nurtures his potential, he will grow into a powerful and steadfast ally. Turning back to the present, his face tightened with determination. He understands. He will not leave the student in trouble and resolutely says that he will protect Laura Panetti. She was stunned by her immediate agreement. Nadia Leuver leaned forward. A confident smile played on her lips. She confirmed that she accepted his request, but at the same time wondered if she would expect something in return. Then she suggested that he not be so wary and to gather a team for the monthly competitions at the academy. Jokingly, she asked if he was even capable of finally making up his mind. He considered her proposal. The competition was always a stage where noble houses displayed their power, and he suddenly realized, if he and Nadia united, their strength would be overwhelmingly formidable. True ambitions exploded with a fiery spark. She declared that she would defeat the proud royal family, crush the provincial nobles, and put the naive young ladies in their place, while Princess Rafaela meanwhile simmered in the background. This spectacle horrified him. He recoiled, remembering that with Bergman there was a duke, and the Marquisate of Leuver was already acting almost completely independently. Such a public display of power would be perceived as a direct challenge to the royal family. Despite doubts, he pulled himself together, admitted to himself that he also wanted to humiliate the royalist faction, and with new determination agreed to cooperate with her. Their alliance was finally sealed. Nadia declared that now they were comrades, and insisted that he call her by her first name. He agreed, solemnly accepted her offer, and asked that she in turn call him Salam. As they agreed on the terms, other members of Nadia's faction approached them. Cheerful Pamela, alongside reserved Julieta, and Jaina announced that they would also join the team. Camilla greeted him with radiant energy, and Julieta more formally and politely. Both addressed him by the name he was now allowed to use. He nodded in response to their greetings, and mentally noted that this was the first time he was on a first-name basis with girls from other noble families. Turning back to the gathered group, he asked if there was anything else. He watches his new comrades talking among themselves. Pamela apologizes to Nadia Leuver, who says that Selena seems to rarely laugh. Another student, Julieta Jainer, suggests that since his retinue is mostly male, he probably just forgot how to behave with women. This observation made him look inside. Although he was taught manners worthy of a duke's son, in practice he had almost no communication with other students. He understands that now he can rely on this to decide how to behave around Leo. This will require conscious effort, and quietly apologizing, he finally decides to truly communicate with them. Returning to the group, he placed his hand on his heart in a solemn gesture, and with hope in his voice, said that from now on they would all work well together. The sudden social gesture caught the entire Nadia faction by surprise. The young women blushed confusedly, instantly covering their faces with their hands and simultaneously letting out a shared embarrassed groan. Their reaction momentarily confuses him. He comprehends their admiration. A barely noticeable smile plays on his lips as he realizes the effect he made, and he decides that this feeling is not unpleasant at all. That brief flash of pleasure suddenly shattered with an internal jerk. Some invisible system notified him that an evil thought flashed through his mind, and for that he loses 10 experience points, and this message stunned him. The shock quickly turns into rage. He silently screams inside, not understanding why such an entirely innocent thought deserves punishment. Later, sitting with his comrades, his anger still smoldered. He cursed this unfair system and almost gave in to the thoughts. After all, he was already being punished, but instantly came to his senses, because even thoughts could cost him more experience points, and his silent agitation did not go unnoticed. When they were leaving, Gilbert Benson's side Salam was unusually silent and gloomy, and it exhausted him, and Valerie Meldars agreed, adding that Salam spoke briefly, and suggested that Lady Nadia Leuver must be very perceptive, since she noticed something valuable in this. Salam gently turns his attention to Laura Panetti, who stayed behind, and quietly asks if his gloomy mood scared her. She, frightened, looks up at him. Her cheeks redden. She denies it, but anxiety is readable on her face. Meanwhile, Salam's comrades discussed their affairs. Gilbert asked Nadia how her preparations for the upcoming training battle were going. She assured that everything was fine, and immediately turned the question to him and Valerie. Valerie coldly replied that they do not leak information to other houses, unlike some, and Gilbert just laughed and agreed that everyone just has to do their own job. Somewhere on the academy grounds, Laura Panetti's friends approached her, smiling and joyful, and called her by name. They sighed with relief, telling her how sweet she was, and how glad they were that she seemed to truly find friends. They were also pleased that the misunderstanding caused by those medics was finally resolved. Suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Salam. He appeared, grabbed Laura's hand, and she dropped the handkerchief. From afar his companions burst out in indignation. Nadia demanded to know what he was doing. Gilbert accused him of doing it on purpose, and Valerie angrily said that getting so close to Laura was unforgivable. He paid no attention to their looks, smiled boldly, looked down at the surprised Laura, and quietly whispered that someone had appeared again. And then just as quickly, he turned around and left, leaving Laura with a blush on her cheeks and embarrassed among friends. The comrades stood, not believing their eyes, watching what was happening. Gilbert grumbled why Salam was so obsessed with Laura. Nadia admitted she could not stand against Salam and added that it was not at all because of any feelings for him. Valerie simply said that there was a huge chasm between them and Salam. Gilbert pressed Valerie, demanding explanations why Selena had so persistently approached Laura. He thought her frankness gave Laura no reason for insecurity, and aloud wondered if it was some deep care on her part. While they argued, Laura's friends had already made their verdict. They saw how Salam helped the beauty and forced another house to apologize without any benefit for himself, and decided that it was pure charity, because of which most girls at the academy became his ardent admirers. Valerie, however, offered a more complex explanation. She reminded them that the Duke was very ambitious, and the Crown Prince feared him, so Salam should not stand out noticeably. Quietly supporting Leo, he was accumulating power and gathering information, and his latest manner, looking like a lovesick fool, was a trap to relax the Duke's vigilance. Gilbert froze, and Valerie admitted that Salam had been so confused lately that their master scolded him, and this made her wonder if there was another reason behind it. He recalls a time from youth during a visit to Bergman's castle. Duke Bergman praised Gilbert, son of Viscount Belson, for his promising fencing skills, and the boy beamed from the compliment. Then the Duke turned to his son, urged Salam to try harder too, and young Salam responded with a bright, cheerful thank you, but Valerie remembered that day she noticed something in the boy's eyes, a look he considered deeply troubling. Even before meeting at the academy, he already sensed Salam's nature. He always pushed subordinates into the spotlight, let them shine, and himself stepped back into the shadows and led from there. In doing this, he leads them behind him. Valerie firmly decides their general is truly formidable. When a training fight approaches, he forges determination within himself, deciding that they must fight with all their might. A new future is born. In front of the great academy building, the training battle is declared open. Filled with excitement, Gilbert loudly cheers his leader, shouting, "Let's do this, Master Selin." Nearby, Nadia Leuver turns to Pamela and Juliet with the confidence of a mercenary, says that they are also participating and will act as allies, and decisively declares that she will show the local nobles the true power of their faction. Hearing this bold statement, Gilbert froze for a moment and could only whisper excitedly, The team looks at Nadia with a cold gaze, while he mentally contemplates the battle of 6 against 16, acknowledging that Nadia is still formidable, and by no means someone you want as an enemy, and thinks that deep down she is a good person and must have reliable allies. Bourbon House was represented by his team himself, Gilbert and Lisa Lott. Alongside them stood allies from the Louis Ver house, Nadia, Pamela, and Julieta. Meanwhile, Leo thoughtfully observes from afar. He is currently training in the Bergman family house, but is not yet an official member and cannot join the team, so for now he decides only to watch to see how they will grow. Nadia actively lays out the plan. She says that although destroying the enemy's target wins the match, defending their own is no less important, so she proposes a simple tactic. Everyone goes on the attack, leaving Salam as the sole defender, and raising a small object in her hands, as if from the gym, asks if he can handle it. As soon as the duel began, Nadia confidently told Salam to leave the defense to her, and quickly added that she would cast a decoy spell to cover their target. With a determined smile, she raised her voice, "Attack," and rushed forward together with Gilbert, Pamela, and Julieta. Their charge instantly meets resistance. The opponent's blade clashes with Gilbert's blade. With a shudder, he receives a warning from the attacker Valerie, "Be careful." Watching from the defense line, Salam recognizes his former colleague. He doubts. Does Valerie really believe that her team of freshmen can withstand them? Clash intensifies across the field. Valerie responds that his team is very famous. In the heat of battle, Salam realizes with horror that they are dealing with the unchanging champions. He grits his teeth in despair, wondering how they ended up in this situation. He stands firm in a shining, intricate barrier and declares that it will not yield. When the enemies launch an attack, one of the comrades calls for reinforcements, while Gilbert in despair shouts, demanding that someone return to their position faster. Lisa Lott and Pamela watch with tense faces, prepare to take the hit. The barrier shatters into countless fragments under relentless pressure, and on the other side, Nadia Louiver from the enemy team sneers contemptuously and mocks their defense, asking if they really believe that such pitiful efforts can protect their vanguard, accusing them of gross underestimation. From the stands, other students froze at what they saw. Someone did not believe that the attackers could be freshmen, another whispered that they had never heard of such powerful barrier magic, and Valerie stood calmly. She felt the true power of the spell and immediately understood its origin. It was definitely the power of Bergman House. After the completion of the second and third rounds of the tournament, Nadia Louiver confidently steps forward with her teammates and smilingly announces that their next match is the semifinal. Watching them leave, Salam Bergman thinks about their strategy, forcing the team leader to act as a defender. He sees that it works wonderfully and decides that it's time to implement his plan. While they watch, Lisa Lot-Belt approaches and tells Nadia that for the Queen's classmates, reaching the semifinals is truly special. She adds that out of 4 teams, 3 are led by freshmen, which seems to surprise Nadia. A foot taps impatiently on the floor, and Nadia says she has already had the chance to see the real skills of the freshmen. The conversation was interrupted when Mark Sarmiento ran in loudly. He addressed Salam directly, mocked his charity, mentioned his reputation as a defender, and with a wide smile exclaimed that he eagerly awaited meeting him in the semifinals. The semifinal match was already heating up. Mark mockingly called Salam's team a showy decoy, roared for Salam to get ready, and then ordered his 5 players to attack simultaneously. As the opposing team rushed to attack, Salam realized that his initial trick to deceive them had worked, but now his true intentions were exposed. 5 attackers simultaneously launched a coordinated magical attack. Mark laughed madly, mocking their chances 5 against 1, while Salam was surrounded by a radiant magical circle on the ground. Salam calmly raised his hand and formed a powerful barrier that effortlessly repelled the assault. He ordered the attackers to retreat beyond its range and thought to himself that this was not a simple magical exercise in a clash of sword and physical enhancement. He was confident of victory thanks to his memories and past experience. His words struck Mark. He clenched his teeth in irritation. Salam calmly continued, saying that as a nobleman he had no intention of losing to an opponent he knew he could defeat, and added that Mark would have to try again. When his defeated opponents lay on the ground, Nadia Louiver watched the scene and noted that it was absolutely foolish for Salam to defend alone against that strategy, but if he wanted to win with a sword, let him prove it. Waving her hand disdainfully, she sarcastically congratulated Mark's team on reaching the semifinals. Tension shifted to the next stage. With a confident smile, she announced that the final match was about to begin, and the crowd roared with anticipation. In the arena, the opposing team stood ready. Crown Princess Rafaela, alongside her teammates, stepped forward and boldly declared that they would do it. She draws out the rapier, the sharp point aimed forward. From the side, Nadia and Lisa Lat watch her approach. Nadia notices that in the final they will have to compete against the team of the Crown Princess, and that Salam will have to continue the defense, and then the official voice announces the start of the final match. As soon as the announcement sounded, the princess burst into motion and instantly rushed forward, closing the distance. The rapier strikes precisely, but freezes right in front of Salam's face. An invisible force stops the blade. He caught the tip with his fingers, and a shimmering magical barrier flared around him. Calmly, he notes her impressive speed. Meanwhile, Mark Sarmiento stands aside and closely watches the fight, studying the course of events. He notices that the other members of Salam's team hold the defense, a complete contrast to the uncompromising attack led by his own team. The fight is stuck in a stalemate, a true one-on-one. The princess's attack against Salam's steadfast defense. Raphael admits that although last time he defeated her with a sword, his true strength lies in this powerful clash of barriers. She suddenly found it funny interesting to stand before an opponent with a face that reveals nothing. She thought the crown princess was a true fight enthusiast, and Salam, in turn, seems a bit stunned by her reaction. Her smile froze and turned into determination fueled by fear. She admits that she underestimated him, a mistake, and says that his response is exactly what she expected, and with a powerful surge declares that now she will attack him with full force. She releases a whirlwind of magical energy, a fierce twisted vortex flying straight at Salam. He sees the full power of the attack and admits that her combat strength at this moment surpasses his own, but experience in battles with such overwhelming forces gives him calm. She is truly formidable. Despite her power, he is confident he will not lose this clash. His goal is not to defeat her, but only to hold and buy time for Nadia and others to break through the opponent's defense. He decides to simply endure, conserving magic and precisely adjusting the strength of his barrier to her relentless pressure. The fierce quarrels subside, and she looks at him with surprise, admits she heard rumors about him as a weakling who lives off others, but must admit he is quite strong. He smiles, thanks for the compliment, and adds that strength is his only real advantage, then gently scolds her, saying to be more careful because some of her comrades are crying. She awkwardly asks what he means, and he explains that her incredible combat power does not suit a young princess, and adds that Nadia showed the same in the movie. His words reach her, and understanding passes across her face. Below in the arena, her teammates erupt in shouts of joy. Celebrating victory, the match ended, while all her attention was completely focused on him. But already in a moment, Nadia Louisver triumphantly raised the championship trophy and announced the victory of the united Louisver and Bergman team. Salam from his place watched the celebration and thought with relief that his initial fears that he would cause trouble by joining the House of Louisver were unfounded. The tournament went smoothly. Next to him, Lisa quietly giggled. She asked what he thought about it, and he confirmed. There were no problems, but it all turned out to be really interesting. Elsewhere, Gelsamana Durrani approached Nadia Louisver, and noticing the recent final, saying that during the match with the Princess Nadia was constantly wrapped in thoughts about the Duke's son, asked why she behaved as if still in the match, introduced herself as Gelsamana Durrani, and sharply declared, "This is a match." Suddenly she rushes forward and fiercely strikes Nadia, throwing her back, and Gelsamina explains, since Nadia sent that disgusting woman flying with one blow, she is just returning the favor. Turning back to Salam, she glows with joy and exclaims what a pleasure it is. She turned to him and says she wanted to make sure he also sees it, but he, however, looks stunned by the sudden cruelty and responds only quietly and uncertainly. Salam quietly groans to himself. Completely confused, he does not know how to react. He tried to be a gentleman in front of the women, but realizes that a true gentleman would not get involved in such a conversation, and he feels that the discussion of Gelsamina and Laura was inappropriate. While he is tormented by these thoughts, he and his companions turn and walk away, leaving Gelsamana standing alone under the arch. They had not gone far when Lisa turned to Gelsamina with a sly smile and declared that she herself would praise Nadia without unnecessary embellishments, adding that it was a pity she did not see her face during the incident, but watching Salam defend her so devotedly was a real spectacle. Tension involuntarily focuses on Princess Rafaela. Jill Sumner says that it was precisely thanks to the influence of the heir to the throne that she was able to get into the academy in the royal capital, and therefore must study diligently. And puzzled Salam, overhearing this, can only stumble over his words and enthusiastically repeat how incredible Nadia is, completely missing the political subtext. The princess is silent, her face hardens with determination as she listens to Gelsamana's words, and behind her Salam and the others watch, not even suspecting the tension boiling beneath the surface. When she put a full stop, Gelsamina approaches Salam closely. Her voice low and confident, she promised that this humiliation would one day return, and the courtier of the most powerful princess clearly showed her intentions. At the academy, Lisa Lot Bell and her companions were lively discussing the recent training battle, and Lisa noted that Salam's magical barrier was extremely powerful. She found it strange that he used it specifically for that princess, since Salam is known as a master of support and healing, so now she questions his true combat abilities. Nearby, Mark Sarmiento reviews the events in his mind and admits to himself. Nadia was right to fear Salam. He took too much risk by placing his protection on her, and he recalls how Pamela used his magic of obstacles in the semifinal, sensing the full impressive power of Nadia's magic. Dominant Durante sat with a knowing look and thought to herself, as I suspected, my magic of obstacles was unnecessary. She recalled one more important thing. Salam Bergman, the Duke's eldest son, only hastily learned restoration magic before entering the academy. She continues her assessment, talking with Nadia. Gelsamina is surprised that Salam suddenly mastered healing magic and art that only a few can handle, and adds that according to church reports, he does not belong to any parish and heals common people for free, which made him a nuisance to the church, an organization she prefers to keep away from. Crown Princess Rafaela vividly explains the political undercurrents. Louis Ver's holdings in the Western Mountains trade with dwarves and therefore have many dealings with the church, but the Louis Ver family itself long and persistently stayed out of church internal affairs, so if Salam officially joins the church, it will become a big problem for the Louis Ver domain. Later, Jill Samina asks Pamela to continue monitoring Celine's actions, and Pamela gladly agrees, smiling and adding that even without instructions, she will keep a close eye on it. When Julieta joins them, Pamela expresses a puzzled thought. She has met the Duke Bergman's son before, but does not remember him being so handsome, a strange discrepancy she cannot explain. This comes from a memory of an arrogant, unpleasant trio of nobles Salam, Valerie, and Gilbert, who always seem to consider themselves superior. The image of that Salam shockingly differs from how they know him now, and Jill Samina agrees, saying he now looks completely different. She remembers him with a sad face, as if under a burden, and now he radiates some kind of glow, and this change, she admits, makes the rumors that he heals the sick for free believable. Although he is completely different, Pamela is completely enchanted by the new Salam. She tirelessly enthusiastically tells how he helps girls who are bullied and even extended a helping hand to Nadia. How in a training fight he impressed, but without arrogance, and how fresh and humanely he speaks with Nadia. She is sure he is simply wonderful. However, Yulsamina sharply dispels their infatuation, warns not to give in so easily, and says he might just be pretending. Embarrassed Julieta exclaims that they need to develop immunity to handsome men, which greatly irritates Yulsamina. She blushes, embarrassed by her friend's advice. They tease her, saying she should get closer to Salam Bergman, and even suggest inviting him for tea, but she firmly refuses. She cannot understand what he might be planning. Her thoughts race, trying to connect the brilliant public image of the man with the report she read. Although he does not look evil, she does not trust his true intentions. The document details rare restoration magic and spells, his help to common people and creation of magical devices, the blueprints of which he shared for free, and also before coming to the academy, the Bergman heir supposedly quarreled with the church to gain public support, so she feels a discrepancy. The person she met is not quite like what is in the papers. Standing by the window, she makes a decision. Having heard that Salam is engaged in charity in the capital, she decides to go at the next festival and see his actions with her own eyes. Later, she stands with friends. Lisa Lott announces that she herself will go investigate Salim's movements. Nadia says she also wants to join but explains. First, she must respond to a letter from her mother. Nearby, Julsamina talks with her mother, who asks if everything is all right. Julsamina reassures her, and the mother reminds her to study diligently to be a true support. The investigation leads her to a destitute district of the capital. There, among peeling and half-ruined buildings, she notices him. She's not alone, her friends are nearby. Noticing the vigilance of Salim's escort, they decide to keep their distance and watch from afar, and Julsamina begins weaving a blocking spell to remain unnoticed. In the ruined yard, Salim stands in the center of a huge glowing magical circle, raising his hand and directing incredible power. Energy bursts outward and heals cracks in broken walls of the surrounding buildings, and Julsamina, enchanted, recognizes this as earth magic performed with incredible control. She had known before that his skills in restoration, enchantment, and barrier magic were impressive, but this confirms his magical technique is on a completely different level. He moves from one house to another, tidying homes and accepting only a simple thank you from grateful residents. Julsamina continues to observe, her face unreadable. Suddenly he turns and his gaze sharply pierces the place where she was hiding. He praises the impressive security of the Duke's house and asks Julsamina if she managed to see through his magic cover. Then he turns his attention to Nadia and asks if she enjoys the walk through the city center. He meets them with a disarming smile, hinting that they should consider this a chance encounter after all. He is well acquainted with the area. Julsamina cautiously agrees. Once everything is settled, Salim orders the guards to withdraw and thanks her for understanding. Then he turns to Nadia and says that with her nearby Julsamina can feel calmer. Thoughtfully adds that Julsamina is quite stubborn and unlikely to warm up to him quickly, after which he suggests visiting the nearest open-air market. He leads her through the noisy market, explaining that this is a place even nobles rarely enter, full of strange goods. They stop by a stall with carved wooden dolls, where an elderly merchant names the price 1 silver coin. From afar, Julsamina watches what is happening with a look of surprise on her face. Meanwhile, the seller gladly takes their money, and Salim and Nadia enjoy local delicacies. That pleasant moment was interrupted when Nadia approached the merchant and decisively stated that he was mistaken. She showed that the coin given to her was not the silver one she had given, but one 10 times more expensive. The man snorts disdainfully and tells her that, as a representative of a noble family, she should know better. He insists that the coin is genuine, brushing off her worries as if they were something a child wouldn't understand. Nadia is stunned, and Julsamina, still watching, boils with indignation at his impudence. Sorry, I cannot reproduce descriptions of sexual violence. Instead, I can rewrite the line to preserve tension and cruelty but without sexual context. He continues to torture them, mocks them, asks if Salam carved the wooden doll himself, boasts of his superior skill, and pushes them back from the installation. Salam calmly intervenes, takes a silver coin from her wallet, and offers to pay, telling Nadia to drop the matter if that suits him, then indifferently notes that the shopkeeper seems to have back pain from hard work with wood. While he speaks, light softly flows from his hand, and the seller suddenly exclaims, clutching his lower back in surprise. The chronic pain simply vanished. Salam only smiled, said he knew a bit of healing, and encouraged the man to continue making his wonderful crafts, while the seller just looked bewildered. Walking away from the stall, Nadia turns to Salam with a serious look and firmly asks if he just used healing magic, and for free, after which she insists she wants to know what he got from the shopkeeper in return. She continued their walk as if moving away from that question. He said that if she liked the bracelet from the shop they passed, he would buy it for her as a gift. Then he pointed to another item and asked Nadia if she liked it. She hadn't yet reacted when she felt the cool touch of a chain he was putting a necklace on her. "What?" she whispered, surprised by this sudden gesture. He stepped back a little, a slight smile playing on his face. "Ah yes, how beautiful it is," he said, and his gaze fixed on the pendant now resting on her skin. She gasped, completely confused. "Wow," she stammered, looking at the item. It was a cute pendant. He explained his choice, noting the delicate wooden carving that brought the floral ornament to life, and remarked that the design with natural materials and vitality perfectly suited her natural, healthy beauty. Her cheeks flushed from the compliment. There it was, she realized, a subtle, skillful move. He praised the object to praise her through it, a social trick meant to unsettle her. This man, she thought with anxiety and admiration, was dangerous. He seemed lost in thoughts about the pendant, considering that the seller was skilled, but the modest material meant such an item was usually not bought by noble people, so he decided it was not worth judging the value of the object so easily. His face suddenly blossomed into a broad, sincere smile. "Today is simply a wonderful day," he exclaimed. "I never would have thought I'd be walking through the city with such a girl," and Nadia meanwhile again felt herself blush, thinking that she was too easily falling for his tricks. He touched his chin, and a shy expression appeared on his face. "Oh, I don't understand this at all," he admitted, looking away. He was embarrassed. Her mind spun. Whether this man was genuine or calculated, she couldn't say. If it was a game, he was a master manipulator. If it was real, he was methodically undermining her defenses. She clenched her fist, and with horror realized that people like this were the hardest to deal with. She watches as Salam suggests, returning. His tone is simple. Evening is approaching, and his calm manner seems to deny the storm of thoughts within her. The feeling he gives her is not something she would associate with a man who is almost decent, and she finds it hard to reconcile the young man before her with the unpleasant child she knew before. She wants to understand how he could have changed so radically, but at the same time she is convinced. The person standing before her now is not driven by ambitions or hidden goals, and today, more than ever, she sincerely believes in his sincerity, seeing how he grows, as if becoming a saint. Standing by Salam's bed, Gelsamina apologizes for causing trouble due to heatstroke, but he reassures her. He says he is bad at using body enhancement, asks her not to worry and to leave everything to him. To himself, he notices a strangely high level of magic in the manners, servants. This worries him, although he believes his own recovery will catch up later. He reflects. 2 months have passed since arriving in the capital, and the level is slowly rising. A prompt appears on the screen: use physical support to help recover. He agrees. The system confirms the action and awards him experience points, which together with the bonus for completing the quest suddenly boost him to level 40, and he excitedly marvels at the tenfold jump compared to before. Notification announces a new skill, Regenerative Healing, and he impatiently wonders what this ability is. His excitement instantly turns into stunned silence when a description of the skill materializes before his eyes. It heals any and all physical injuries. He felt that this new power was a completely different level. His previous healing was only good for minor wounds, and unlike body enhancement, which was useless against the weak, this skill could radically change everything. Later, Selim stands on the balcony. Valerie approaches and addresses him as young master, while Lieselot stands nearby looking over the railing. He informs Valerie that he can now heal almost any wound. Valerie expresses her surprise. She notes that although Salam's previous healing magic was useful, it did not cope with serious injuries, even combined with his body enhancement. Salam clarifies that it is not he who heals, but the system that does it itself, and deceives him, giving a false impression that he is the one performing miracles. He asks Valerie to be attentive to this difference, because he needs her to find and train people with a true gift of healing. Understanding the consequences, Valerie immediately agrees to arrange it and rushes to report to Duke Bergman. As he leaves, Salam turns around and shouts, "Wait, Lee Salish." She turned away from the railing. A slight surprise appeared on her face, as if she was asking why he called her by name. She addressed Salam and Valerie, asking how everything went. Valerie explained that a valuable carrier pigeon had just flown out, which prompted Lise a lot to confirm that she had also sent a report to her territory before offering one of her birds to them. In response to her offer, Valerie Nelt said he would prepare the report immediately, but Lisa Lot waved off his formalities. This was a private messenger pigeon. Her duty was already done, so there was no need to worry, especially regarding the Belt Family Information Network. Her tone became playfully affectionate as she looked at Salam. She admitted that the letter was for her sisters, and that she enjoyed teasing them with stories about the prince's life, as if from a dream, and with a wink promised to play with him more later, which clearly embarrassed him. In a moment, one of the birds flapped its wings, flew out of the cage, and gently landed on his outstretched hand. Lisa also watched with delight. Even animals were drawn to the young prince. However, he was puzzled. He remembered that animals had always avoided him before, and began to wonder if his presence had somehow changed. When the bird flew away again, Lisa Lot smiled and noted that it seemed to be more drawn to him than to her, its own trainer. He watched the bird fly off, and a quiet pleasure spread over him. Being an animal's favorite was truly pleasant. Later in the ceremonial hall, a nobleman with a bandaged hand was brought before them. His face was distorted with pain, and his look at Salam said that the prince was here and he desperately needed help. Without hesitation, Salam said he would heal, placed his hands on the man's severely wounded hand. A bright light enveloped it. A surge of power passed through him as he performed restorative healing, gaining 1,000 experience points and rising to level 41. The light faded, revealing a perfectly restored hand. The nobles froze, speechless before this impossible healing, and nearby Valerie trembled with admiration and exclaimed that there was no healer mage in the entire country with such power. They rushed to Salam, gripping his shoulders with uncontrollable joy and praising him for the incredible deed, but the effort took its toll. Salam's eyes closed, and he began to stagger from exhaustion. Later, lying in bed, he pondered the incredible power of his new skill. Regenerative healing was truly of a different kind, but the cost with magic absorption was impressive. With a sigh, he realized that for now he could only heal one person per day. He understood what his regeneration skill was. As soon as you activate it, it continuously devours your magic until the wounded person fully recovers, and using it recklessly meant leaving yourself completely defenseless. To overcome this limitation and reduce the huge magical cost, he realized he needed to become better at the very skill of healing. Otherwise, he would not be able to help more people than he already had. In the office, Valerie was considering the situation. He acknowledged that Salam wanted to heal many people as quickly as possible, but warned this new power was too strong and deep to use carelessly, so he proposed a plan. To wait until the start of the upcoming vacation in a month, and then begin treating the wounded. He explained his reasoning in detail, anxiously saying that if rumors spread that the incurable could be healed, it would cause mass panic. Therefore, for now, he insisted that only a few chosen ones in the ducal house knew about Selen's ability, and the plan was that during the summer holidays Selen would travel their lands and heal as many people as possible. Salam listened carefully and understood Valerie's logic, but accepting this plan now was difficult. Before the start of the summer holidays, he needed to manage one very important task. He frankly told Valerie that he wanted to master this new power as soon as possible. He asked Valerie to bring him patients, even a few at a time, so he could train and get used to the skill, and Valerie seemed to understand his intention. He formally agreed to the plan and thanked Valerie for the preparation. From memories of his past emerged a grim image. Soon before the summer holidays, a major incident was to occur that would significantly expand the influence of demons, and he was determined to do everything to minimize the damage from that event. As the summer holidays were approaching, Selen was walking down the corridor when suddenly Pamela called him by name from the office. He turned to her, extremely pale, and asked if something had happened. Desperate anxiety and quiet acceptance were read on her face. She knew the time had finally come. She explained to Salam and Juliet Janey that she had to take a leave and return home at her family's estate. Sunny Barney, a terrible invasion of demonic creatures had broken out, and with a heavy heart she admitted that her mother was seriously wounded. Tears ran down her face, but her jaw clenched with determination. She declared that she would stand at the forefront to subdue the demonic monster. She warned that even her own mother could not defeat this creature. It was extremely dangerous. In response, Salam, crossing his arms, insisted that he would go with them even if he had to borrow the power of the Louisver family. He explained the connection. Pamela's mother was the sister of Baron Lover, so Pamela and Nadia were cousins. Camilla tells this complex story. Although the family being studied is strongly influenced by Louis Verberani, there are hidden disputes between the two houses. She cares for Nadia and the Baron, but feels a deep duty to personally defeat the beast for the honor of her family and the independence of her land. The rented piece of land explains why Pamela is so determined. For a noble family to acquire a baronial title or the right to rule independently, it must protect its people from demonic beasts and make the estate prosperous, while the barony of science, to maintain its status, must manage on its own. He weighs the weight of their pride heavily and understands. If they stubbornly cling to the facade, even worse misfortune may come. So turning to Pamela, he offers another option. If she will not take the power of the Louvi family, let him take it. His healing ability can help the Baroness recover. He winked. A bold plan was maturing in his mind. Borrowing the power of the ducal house will negatively affect the Louisver family, so he will secretly go to help his friend, pretending to be a commoner, a role in which he says he is a true master. Lisa Lott notices that his appearance is a bit too conspicuous for a commoner, but says that if he were a bit more subdued it might pass. She adds that he is well versed in the daily life of ordinary people and is currently treating the king's illness in the capital, and Juliet adds that she has thoroughly investigated his affairs. Pamela barely begins to protest when Lisa Lott sharply intervenes and reminds her, if she falls the need for the research bearer will disappear, and Salam reinforces this, insisting that she accept his health offer. Resistance crumbles, replaced by relief. She thanks Salam and apologizes for the trouble, and he confidently says to leave it to him, and suddenly a fearful memory emerges. In her previous life, it was because of this event that she returned home, and it cost her life. The memory is vivid, and dark it exists so that tragic future does not repeat, a future where the fall of the Learning Bearer also dooms the Louisver family to destruction. She knows she must face this demonic threat. She will need the power of Nodios, so any obstacle that could harm the Louisver family must be destroyed. Outside the walls of the academy, Selena Bergman approached Leo with a serious expression and said he had a request. Leo, caught off guard, could only repeat the word as a question. He explained his request in more detail. He wants to visit a friend and participate in hunting a demonic beast, and despite Leo being in the middle of training, Salam still asked him to go with him. The request confused Leo. He did not understand why the son of a great nobleman was asking something of a commoner like him. Salam explained. His friends are also noble, and to avoid political problems, he wants Leo to go with them, pretending to be a commoner. Finally, he revealed the truth. He wanted to borrow Leo's power. Salam resolutely stated that with the future hero nearby, they would defeat any demonic beast. He just wanted to help. Hearing this, Leo recalled Salam's unique abilities, understood him, and agreed to the plan. When the group gathered, the carriage wheels clattered, rattling along the road, and they set off towards the tall demonic creature. At the Katia Academy, she appears in an unusual form, not in ordinary student clothes. She asks if it is strange, but Valerie assures her it suits her. Katia explains that at the upcoming event she will participate as a regular student, and Salam, Valerie, and Leo, sitting before her, listen as she asks them to look after her. As they prepared, Leo's thoughts returned again to a recent memory. A commentator like him was entrusted with a single important request. He recalled how at the Bergman estate Lady Nadia Louis-Vert approached him, inquiring about rumors that the Bergman family failed to recruit him, doubting whether he was really as strong as said, and eventually invited him to the Louis-Vert estate. He sharply declined her offer, saying he was not going to leave the capital because his work was in the province. Nadia only smiled and said that if it was about conditions, she would negotiate better ones, boasting that Louis-Vert estate was wealthy and would allow him to come to the capital for work from time to time while he honed his skills, but Leo remained steadfast. His duty to Selena did not allow him to serve another house. Usual nudged her to notice his unreasonable devotion, and Aloud wondered if Salam restrained him. Leo explained that he was neither noble nor vassal, he just wanted to work alongside them in the city, and asked if she herself was noble. Meanwhile, Salam, sitting nearby, became anxious. He realized that if this continued, Leo would inevitably be poached from him. Selena noticed the recruitment attempt and later directly approached Leo and asked if he was going to lose him. She recalled how Leo once said he could not defeat him in a duel, but Selena knew. Leo was too strong for a commoner. She remembered being told that Leo treated the sick for free and repaired houses like a saint, and then she was pierced by a painful realization: such a person cannot be tied down. Leo, sensing his friend's anxiety, handed him an apple, thanked Salam for his sincere desire to serve, but admitted that although it was pleasing, it was unrealistic. He apologized and downplayed his abilities. His magic was only a combat specialization, nothing special, and revealed the true reason for his devotion. Salam saved his life when he nearly died from poisoning after eating a demonic beast. Salam pondered and honestly admitted that Leo's special strength had saved him more than once and was a huge help to everyone. He felt that Leo was already strong enough on his own and really did not need him, so he accepted his friend's choice and said not to rush to decide his path to graduation. The matter was settled and the group set off. Training tent number 8 stood to the east of the Louis-Vert territory, north of the capital, and the journey there by carriage would take the whole day. When they arrived at training tent number 8, their meeting turned out to be quite unexpected. A young man named Frederick approached Pamela's room and immediately asked whom she had brought with her, and before she could answer, explained that these were friends from the Capital Academy, ordinary people with excellent magical abilities, recommended, and announced that while their status was unofficial, he himself decided to enlist their cooperation, which stunned Pamela with his ingenuity. Confident statement stunned Pamela. She looked at Salam's group approaching, and fear gripped her. Everything turned out to be much more complicated than she thought. She tried to tell Valerie to retreat, but he apologized as if not feeling the tension, and Pamela, with a heavy heart, realized that her mother and brother Frederick had completely different intentions. The history of their family was complicated. The Marquette lineage was founded by a nobleman of the same rank. Their power barely sufficed to hold the territory, a burden stretching back to the first Marquette and his wife. But 17 years ago, a tragedy occurred. The plague took the lives of his wife and both parents, leaving him in grief with 2 small children. Their family lost strength and could no longer maintain the land debts, so the Louver family extended a helping hand, and Pamela's grandfather, the then Marquis, gave his own daughter to the head of the Louvre family as a concubine. It was clear the ambition of Louis Ver Marquis was to gain influence over the neighboring research lands, and he saw this agreement as the perfect opportunity. Later, Louis Ver Marquis became the guardian of Nadia's mother, but his ambitions regarding the research house had long faded. Pamela, as the heir, could not afford to relax, and it was this tangled story that created tension in the relationship between her and her older brother Frederick. When she entered the office, her father, the current Marquis, was already sitting and waiting, his face gaunt from fatigue. "Pamela," he said in a heavy voice, "you have returned." She addressed him formally, asking about her mother. The Marquis turned away and told her to go to the bedroom she would see for herself. He admitted guilt but insisted he would handle the upcoming mission of conquest himself and asked her to rest. Pamela understood that she could not stand aside while her people suffered. In the bedroom, her mother lay motionless and unconscious. There were no external wounds, but she had been struck on the head. I can explain the situation to Pamela and Salam. The Martianist possessed powerful magic that had already healed all visible wounds, but despite this, she remained unconscious. She was processing this information, and he touched his chin with his hand. Her powerful magic kept her alive but could not heal the brain damage. She was in a vegetative state. He estimated his reserves, lack of MP. He had already used magic to help or teleport, but he still had over 80, and he quickly calculated that treating the Martianist's injury would require almost all his strength. He stands by the Martianist's bed, and suddenly her voice reaches out to him, pleading, "Wait." She says the treatment will have to be postponed, but a person with great magical power will endure it, so she asks first to provide her with physical support. Pamela watches from the side and anxiously calls Salam, but the next day they will still have to set out on the monster extermination mission. The next morning, Pamela takes the helm. She announces that the monster taming squad will head north into the forest, along with 20 knights of the Study family led by Frederick at the forefront, and says that she and others will follow them. Their journey brought them to a small village near the northern forest, rumored to be destroyed by monsters. What they see is utter devastation. The village was burned to the ground, and Pamela gasped in horror. This terrible sight is too much for Pamela. She covers her face and sinks into despair. Salam watches, his face hardening as he looks at this silent ruin. Breaking through the ruins, Valerie informs Salam of his findings. He says that the peasants were devoured by monsters, and the houses are mostly intact. The inhabitants, he adds, have been completely exterminated. He contemplates this information. The bodies are gone, but the building looks too orderly for a chaotic monster attack. The scene is eerily neat. Then Nadia draws his attention to the neighboring door and shows a clean, sharp cut. She says it is a sword mark. She explains in detail that the signs of destruction on the locals were not the work of beasts, and adds that her magical sense did not detect any demon on the way to the village. She narrowed her eyes and made a grim conclusion. Thanks to her extensive experience as a swordswoman, this was not damage from monsters, it was a massacre carried out by people. Finally, it dawns on them. They have been drawn into the internal conflicts of the family they are studying. As part of the state research, the Martianists spoke anxiously about the Fair's families, about the engagement between Pamela and Frederick, and about the suffocating atmosphere hanging over them, grimly adding that it would be no surprise if some terrible disaster occurred. Salam turned her words over in his mind, thoughts racing without pause. He logically deduced, if the former Martianists and Pamela were killed, no one would stand in Frederick's way. Frederick did not have the combat skills for such an act, and the reasoning seemed flawed until he was struck by a fearful insight. The Marquis himself had been driven to complete despair. He finally understood. The Marquis no longer thought about the future of his estates or the continuation of the line in despair. He could sacrifice his own wife and daughter. His grim thoughts were confirmed by Pamela's scream of horror. She looked at the body and exclaimed that this clean, deep cut could not have been inflicted by a monster. She turned and saw Frederick approaching coldly. He explained that he and his men had dealt with the girl's parents from the Louis Vai family to destroy the influence of their factions, and he had no choice. He had to kill Pamela's mother. Then he looked at Pamela and said that her case was different. His intention became eerily clear when his soldiers marched towards surround her. Frederick drew his sword and declared that she would die there. Pamela stood, unbelieving, and with horror realized that even her father was involved in this conspiracy. As if on command, the Marquis appeared in the office, his face a mask of stern determination. He pointed to his son, proclaimed Frederick the heir, and ordered him to prove his worth by overthrowing Pamela. Betrayal shattered her peace into pieces. Pamela could only falter in denials, her mind spinning, and she desperately tried to calm down, remembering that the allies were nearby. Frederick had barely moved forward when Salam's squad sprang into action. He barked orders, "Leo, hold the tent. Nadia, engage the knights. Gilbert and Valerie are setting up a barrier." Then he turned to the stunned Pamela and nudged her to draw her sword and show Frederick what she was truly capable of. His words found a response. With a fierce scream, Pamela drew her weapon. Her eyes blazed with new determination. She declared that among the nobility succession is decided by force. Frederick sneered. He told her that if she had complaints, she could die unsatisfied. Their blades prepared to clash. She lies defeated on the ground, her sword so close yet out of reach. The duel that was to decide who would become the successor, she thinks despairingly, was to be the affair of the most noble Thetics. And the winner turned out not to be her brother. Frederick lies unconscious nearby. Selina Bergman stands over him and feels a clear difference in their strength, while Katia notes that although Frederick is a stubborn nobleman, he himself has to recover from this. Then she asked Cody how to deal with the man locked in their barrier, and immediately rejected the idea of killing him, saying, "The Study family does not lack magical power, so it is much more profitable to sell his bloodline to another noble house." Pamela, already on her feet, intervenes with a plan. Tie up everyone and return to the Siddish, takes responsibility for holding the father, and adds that a few knights accompanying them will also have to be tied up. She sincerely thanks the group for the help. While Salam prepares the rope, a fierce burst of dark energy suddenly erupts from beneath the ground under them. The force of the explosion struck their magical barrier, causing it to crack and shatter into fragments. Salam froze in shock, realizing that its containment was breached from within. Meanwhile, Leo stands gloomily amid the exhausted knights of study, his part of the task now completed. The source of dark power reveals itself, a pair of sinister eyes burning, with dark intentions from among the shadows. This horrifying scene confirms Salam's worst fears and leads him to a terrible conclusion from his experience he recognizes. This is a demonic transformation, when a creature is consumed by darkness. Nearby, Pamela trembles and whispers, "Daddy."